Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the MrWarrenHayes Show. I don't know why I'm going, maybe because tonight's podcast is so tasty and delicious that you're it's gonna be like eating the most delicious food. You know, imagine your favorite food, your favorite dish being presented in front of you, and you're like, you can already taste it. Well, that's how I feel. You should feel regarding this week's episode of the MrWarrenHayes Show, where we talk about professional wrestling for a couple of hours right here on youtube.com/MrWarrenHayes or on your favorite podcast application. Thank you very much for checking it out and for hanging out till maybe even the very end. Why don't you? That'd be tremendous. And at the same time, if you're watching this on YouTube, consider leaving a like on the video, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast application, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify would also be tremendous. All sorts of stuff happening this week. We're still moving on with the new format of the podcast, which is a mix of streaming elements and elements that I record offline. A nice little hodgepodge of that. This will probably be the last week that I talk about it. We've been doing it for a couple of weeks, and I think I've heard actually a couple of people tell me, hey, I really like the new format, Warren. I haven't heard the opposite, which is pretty good. So I think I think it was a good gamble. I think it's a good way to approach things. People seem to be enjoying it, so let's keep going down that road. This is probably the last time I'm going to mention that, everything is kind of like a Frankenstein, and it's a Frankenstein, which turns out it's Halloween season, right? October has started, so it's a good time to start talking about Frankenstein and whatnot. Better the show be a Frankenstein than a creature of the Black Lagoon, if you ask me. I don't know why. Just throw that out there. No disrespect to the creature of the Black Lagoon. Water breathing is important. Look, we'll get into this on another occasion, because that's for right now. We're gonna get into the pro wrestling talk. We've got a solid lineup of stuff. We are going to be reviewing, of course, the New Japan Destruction in Kobe show, an eventful show. Lots of stuff happening that I really liked. So we're going to be going over that. We've got our typical contract news and notes happening as well. I got my thoughts on the Vince doc as well. WWE Bad Blood preview. See, it's a busy show. I better cut the nonsense and just get right to it. Thank you very much, folks, for being here. Here we go. I would like to start the podcast this week talking about the Mr. McMahon documentary over there on Netflix, the Vince McMahon doc that had everyone talking, of course, for multiple reasons. I watched all 6 episodes, was able to cram those in, even talked about it on stream last Friday, and I'm going to summarize all my thoughts here, bring it all together to give you my impressions, and ultimately, I guess, a review of what I thought about it. I guess the broad strokes is that I feel like it was a documentary that was caught in an identity crisis. Didn't exactly know which way to swing, and one where if you're already a wrestling fan, and a long time wrestling fan, I don't know how much new information was gleaned here. I don't know if there was stuff that you didn't know. I think it, did a good job in preaching to as wide an audience as possible. It cast a very wide net, but maybe for more hardcore fans like myself, maybe this one was a little bit of a tedious watch. Maybe this one had you groan in certain circumstances. But I think overall, the problem was this question of an identity crisis. That being said, I understand why there was an identity crisis, why maybe it felt like I was watching a doc that was trying to position itself, because let's not forget, this is important to point out, in 2019 is when the production on this doc series started, right, with Chris Smith. It was originally planned to be I believe at first it was supposed to be a movie, right? And then it turned into a 4-part series and was ready to release around WrestleMania time in 2022. But then the Wall Street Journal dropped the bombshells about reporting that, first reporting, the first bombshell, reporting that the WWE Board of Directors was investigating Vince McMahon for allegedly paying off a woman to silence claims of an affair. And this set off a cascade of revelations and investigations. We're not going to reiterate that. It ultimately led to, I guess, the biggest bombshell being the Janelle Grant lawsuit, but we're not going to go down that path specifically. Most of you probably already know all about it. If you're new to this, well, you can easily check it out. You can easily search for it. I even recommend following WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling. Both Brandon Thurston and John Pollock, respectively, have been doing tremendous work in staying on top of the story. So the information is out there. But once that happened, coming back to the doc itself, once these allegations started appearing, these reports started bubbling up, WWE Studios, who was once involved in the production of the documentary, quietly distanced itself, removing its name from the production. And you could already see that this was a bit of a concern for them, since it was a pretty bold move to do. Vince, even after that, decided that he tried to buy the documentary back from Netflix. You know, I guess he was afraid of how he was going to be portrayed in here, and that added a little extra layer of chin scratching. We're like, what is exactly going on? What is being talked about in this doc, right? He reportedly felt the documentary portrayed him in a negative light, which is ironic considering Vince usually doesn't care much about that, and he has a tendency, you know, to blur the lines between himself and his Mr. McMahon character, and I think that's a significant. It's a significant part of the doc, and one of the things that Vince has ended up really criticizing is that you never see the real me here. But what is the real Vince McMahon? Who is the real Vince McMahon? Even people interviewed in the documentary admitted that they weren't sure where the character ended and the real Vince began. A lot of people were even saying the character is just an extension of Vince. Maybe a little more exaggerated, but nonetheless, they could see Vince in Mr. McMahon itself. So if his concern was that he was being portrayed in a negative light because the documentary makers weren't able to separate Vincent Kennedy McMahon from Mr. McMahon, isn't that kind of what he wanted? Why would he be so upset with the way he was shown, especially since at the start of the doc, Vince basically outright says, you know, that he's not going to tell everything, right? He sits down and he says something to the effect of, well, you know, all the stories I could tell you, and the interviewer goes, yeah, that's what we're here for. And he says, well, I can't tell you everything. You know, I just can't tell you everything. I'm going to tell you what you want to know. So like, what is he expecting at this point? If he's expecting this depiction of himself, then why isn't he just open and honest and letting everything flow? Why is it that from the get-go, he's setting up a wall and saying, nah, we're just going to talk about what I want to talk about? So what this does then is quite well summed up by the flagship's Rich Craich, who said this in one of our haunts. This could easily be called like the real story of Vince McMahon's WWE rather than just the real story of Vince McMahon. It feels more like a WWE DVD or one of those A&E WWE docs, right? Deeply intertwined with the company's history, not necessarily about the man behind it. Vince himself, like I said, likes to keep the lines blurred between Vince McMahon and Mr. McMahon, and that's exactly how the documentary portrays it. There's there's attempts to try and separate the two, but they're so surface level and there's no depth to it. And we spend more time talking about the successes and productions of WWE and going and digging into the weeds of that we really don't spend any time trying to get to the heart of who Vince is. Maybe this is why Vince was so bothered by it, that the real him never got to shine, I guess. But then again, Vince, like I mentioned, seemed to have established a playing field where I'm just going to tell you what you want to know, and we're not going to go all that deep. Vince has always been in control of his narrative. If nothing more came forth, it's because Vince didn't let it. Towards the end of the doc, you have Bruce Pritchard, right, who returns to shoot some more footage after his original interviews that happened, months previous to that. Because, like we said, a lot of the interviews had happened way before the Janelle Grant stuff had happened. Most of them, actually. So there was there's a lot of people who were there who were interviewed before any of these allegations and reports came forward. But Bruce Pritchard did both. He did post, pre and post Janelle Grant lawsuit, and he came back and he outright said, he was asked. You could hear the interviewer say, "You saw some early cuts of the documentary," and Pritchard goes, "Yes. What did you think of what do you think of what you saw?" And Pritchard outright says, "It sucks. I thought it sucked." And he uses the same talking point as Vince does. We don't really get to see. I don't think you portrayed Vince in a fair light. And then he gives the anecdote where Vince helped his wife, Pritchard's wife, with paying for her treatment for cancer a few years ago. He says this exemplifies what Vince McMahon is. It shows the kind of man he is. And that's who Vince McMahon is to me. And I'm like, Bruce, this is, my head, I'm not actually talking to him, but in my head, I'm like, Bruce, this is fantastic. Good for you. But these personal stories are never really shared or explored. Instead, what the documentary does is focus on the same old topics. The road to WrestleMania 1, the Montreal screw job, 93,000 people in the Pontiac Silverdome, Ted Turner, the steroid trial, the Attitude Era. It's the familiar WWE mythology that was shared. We hear from people like Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff and others recounting stories we've heard 100 times before. These stories that have become legend, that are part of this mythos, right? So when the series does decide, though, to dive into something potentially interesting, like, for instance, the strained relationship between Vince and Shane in episode 5, it barely scratches the surface. Just as you think you're about to learn something new, that we're going to get into the nitty gritty as to why Shane decided to leave WWE in 2009, right? And they mention it a couple of times. Oh, well, their relationship was strained. And, why was it strained? What happened? Give us some events. Let's get into it. Did they fight? Did they argue? It was all very, very surface level, attacking the subject with generalizations. Like, for instance, oh, they were just always at odds. Or what happened to them? Why did they grow apart? Oh, well, Shane wanted Vince to buy UFC. Vince said no, and that was it. It just left us wanting more. The places, the spots where we could have learned more about Vince were just remained very, very high level and uninteresting ultimately. So yeah, on that front, it struggles. It flirts with going deep, but ultimately settles for retelling the myth of Vince McMahon, the genius visionary who built an empire from nothing, a man who survived controversy after controversy, who stood up to the federal government and won. Invincible, undefeatable Vince McMahon, right? In episode 6, the doc concludes with, a bad man gone sentiment, focusing on how WWE is thriving without Vince, a clear attempt to close the chapter on this era while reinforcing the image of the company's resilience and that it is better than ever without the bad man. Probably also, doing good by their partner Netflix, right? With whom they have a huge deal now, they're entrenched into this huge rights deal with Netflix. So that was part of it too, right? To make sure that we're able to snap the past away, toss it behind, and continue moving forward. Just like Vince said a few times in the documentary, I'm not worried about the past. I'm focused on moving forward. But still, like, despite his complaints, it's worth remembering that Vince always knew what story was going to be told here. He's the master of narrative control. So why he felt the need to issue an official statement on Twitter, on the lead up to the documentary, or to try to buy back the documentary some time ago, I mentioned that earlier, even calling on his pal Ari Emanuel to help, it's a little puzzling. Was it the pressure of the Wall Street Journal investigations catching up to him, or was it just simply the frustration of seeing his legacy framed in a way he couldn't fully dictate? Yeah, either way, Vince's actions seem to contradict his own words from the start of the documentary. And we can go over the episodes here. I don't want to go too deep. There are some people who are doing very detailed breakdowns of every episode. This is not what I want to do here. I just want to go over every episode, sort of to reinforce these points that I'm making. Like in episode 1, which by the way starts in 2021 is when they started filming. You start to understand that they're going to have all these key figures in Vince's past, all associated with WWE. Vince is reluctant to talk about himself, but he still participates in framing the narrative. And I think the fact that he displays that he's reluctant is part of that narrative. At the same time, we're reminded of the many interviews that were conducted before the Janelle Grant lawsuit and the Wall Street Journal expose. The rest of episode 1 kind of feels like a recap of Vince's early days, growing up poor, meeting his father at 12 years old, while he was living in a trailer park, his rise in the wrestling business. It's all factual, right? It's all things that Vince has told us that we know about, but it doesn't do any deep dives. They touch on the origins of Hulkamania, of course. The Cyndi Lauper's involvement in wrestling, the infamous David Schultz, John Stossel incident. But the documentary doesn't explore these in depth. And I can understand why it doesn't as well, because the focus of this documentary is to paint a picture regarding Vince McMahon and the WWE. So, going down the path of the Stossel incident, right? That's something that warrants its own episode. And there's multiple things in this doc that are attacked from a very surface level, but I can appreciate that in regards to the production constraints, they can't suddenly start diving into, the death of Owen Hart, for instance, or the Jimmy Snuka stuff, or the Ring Boys, because all of these elements could easily be documentaries on their own or be a full-blown episode. Most of them have been covered by the Dark Side of the Ring series, so the levels that are the levels and depth that are involved in these incidents that require a lot of time to break down and really get to the essence of it. So that was episode 1. Episode 2 dives more into the wrestling boom of the 80s and right into the 90s, the grueling schedule that the guys had to endure, and of course the steroid scandals. You had Hulk Hogan's appearance on Arsenio Hall, where he denied steroid use despite Vince advising him to come clean. which was a key moment, right? It's an era defining segment, and one that had tremendous repercussions. There's also a brief mention of Hulk Hogan snitching on Jesse Ventura, who was attempting to unionize the wrestlers, which is interesting because it's probably one of the only true new bits of information that came out of the documentary. It had been heavily implied that Hogan was the guy who snitched to Vince, and it was. I even believe Vince said, "Yeah, it was Hogan who told me" in some interview at some point. But Hogan never fessed up to it, and for Hogan to be, "Yeah, I did it. I did it, and I do it again." Essentially, is what it boiled down to. That was new. That was some new information. We got that clarification. Not that anyone who knew it was really surprised, but nonetheless, it was interesting for him to actually have a no bullshitting moment, which is rare for Hogan. The documentary touches also, well, this episode, I should say, touches on some of the darker corners of that era as well, including the allegations around, like I mentioned, Jimmy Snuka, the Ring Boy scandal, which was a big deal. Bret Hart outright calls Mel Phillips a pedophile in this segment. But again, the doc really doesn't spend a lot of time on these topics. Is there a reluctance to stay on some of these uncomfortable moments, or is it something that just you can only cover so much in a documentary that is spanning decades over a man and his company, his empire, essentially? I kind of lean more towards the latter here, where there's only so much time available to cover these topics. In episode 3, we get into the steroid trial with Hulk Hogan ending up testifying against Vince. It's noted that Hogan was granted immunity but despite the immunity, he ended up protecting Vince with the federal agents just sort of shrugging and looking at each other. What the hell is he doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on our side? From there, we transition into the New Generation era talk, with Bret Hart stepping up as the face of WWE and leading into the rise of Monday Nitro and WCW, of course, the Monday Night Wars. And if you're like me, you groaned audibly when this started to kick in, because I have seen so many documentaries and stories and videos and retellings and recountings of the friggin' Monday Night Wars. Like, we need to set this into the past. We have to take a bit of Vince's advice here and relegate that to the past so we can start moving forward. I mean, it's again, nothing you've never heard of if you're a pro wrestling fan. However, if you were a pro wrestling fan and you were sitting down with your partner and they were watching this as someone who is not a pro wrestling fan, well, there's a bunch of really interesting information that came out here to help draw a bigger picture. And ultimately, that's what the audience that this documentary was trying to get. I think it's important to underscore that. The audience that they were trying to attract was much more of a general, dare I say, casual audience than just your typical hardcores. And they succeeded. In creating a documentary that spoke to non-fans. I think it's very successful on that point. By episode 4, the narrative then shifts to the Attitude Era, which again had me rolling my eyes so hard I could see my brain, and the birth of the Mr. McMahon character. So it took us 4 episodes to get to the idea that, there is a fictionalized McMahon that exists. It's Mr. McMahon, a personification of Vince's real life business tactics, ultimately, right? But again, this episode, cranked up. We got a personification, but cranked up to 1,000, right? Overblown, over the top. But again, like, this episode feels like a retread of, dozens of Attitude Era docs and podcasts already out there. There's nothing new, and the show kind of glosses over Owen Hart's tragic death as well. Basically saying, basically giving an opportunity here to show to establish the idea that Vince probably was that WWE, I should say, was not responsible for Owen's death, when in reality, it's a lot more debatable when you start looking at the police reports from the Kansas City PD. Anyway, again, this is something that, there's already a Dark Side of the Ring episode on. There's so much stuff. So I can understand why they had to do this. And of course, we talk about the Montreal screw job. We also talk about the Wendy Richter screw job. And what I thought was interesting in both of these circumstances is how Vince sort of portrayed both Richter and Brett as prima donnas, right? It's like, hey, you guys you just have a title that belongs to me, and you just have to follow a script and drop the title, right? And he sort of blows them off at like them being prima donnas. Oh, they didn't want to do business the right way, essentially. So I had to take the belt off of them because the belt belonged to me. It was the right thing to do for business. Well, I would argue that the right thing to do for business was probably do right by their demands and expectations. One thing that wasn't covered in this documentary when it came to Wendy Richter, is that leading up to her screw job, she had been asking Vince for a raise. She was making less money than the prelim guys on the show, and she, as many people will agree with, was an intrinsic part of WWE going mainstream, the rock and wrestling connection, right? Of course. The first appearance on MTV, she was an integral part of that. The Cyndi Lauper stuff, like she was a lot of this connective tissue. She was even being featured on the Hulk Hogan Saturday morning cartoon, but she wasn't getting any royalties. She just wanted to make more money, like a respectable amount of money, and Vince was stonewalling her. And instead of, I guess, doing business the right way, as Vince likes to say, well, he screwed her out of the title. What'd she do? She packed up and she left. Like, it was the ultimate show of disrespect. And when it comes to Brett, well, money was at the core of the issue, because the 20-year contract that Vince had set up for him, Vince realized, I can't possibly honor this. This is ridiculous. So he basically told Brett, I won't be able to pay you, but why don't you go negotiate with WCW and find, go get yourself the big bag of cash over there that I will not be able to provide for you. So he allowed him to go. Never forget that Vince was the guy who gave him permission to do that. And unlike what Vince said, where it was like, I was afraid that Brett was going to show up on Nitro with the belt and, pull a Medusa essentially and the Lunger Blaze. He was so afraid that Brett was going to do that he had to take the title off of him because Brett was refusing to drop it. When in reality, Brett, who, if my memory serves me right, did have creative control in his contract, basically told Vince, I'm ready to drop this title, but not in Canada. It was framed as though Brett didn't want to drop it to Shawn Michaels because they hated each other. Brett has always maintained, I didn't like Shawn, but I'm a professional and I'm going to do the right thing. He didn't have a problem dropping the belt to Shawn. What he had a problem with was dropping the belt in Canada. And for him, he might as well have just been stripped or whatever. He just did not want to drop the belt there. Well, ended up with the screw job and all of that. But just so that we know, it's not a question of being a prima donna or not, or whatever. There's much more intrinsic stuff underneath that wasn't mentioned. And again, I understand that there's a lot of details that there's a lot of stuff in these screw job moments that require a lot of time to break down if you really want to get into the details. But you could do like what I just did right here. Add just 2 to 3 more minutes just to give a counterpoint to whatever Vince is saying and you move on, right? I think that would have been possible. But nonetheless, of course we had to go in depth with the Montreal Screwjob. But then again, I also understand that it's connected to the creation of the Mr. McMahon character. In episode 5, we talk about the family dynamic, or at least that's what I thought we were going to talk about, because all four McMahons, I should say. I tried to say kids in it, but all 4 members of the McMahons were all 4 of them were interviewed for the doc, including Linda. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe we're gonna hear a little more about this dynamic, this family dynamic, which of course is unusual, is a little weird, and requires, some, not requires, but where would benefit from getting a little more insight. I think like this is something that is never really spoken about. So it would have been really fun to dive a little deeper. But again, there's nothing really there. We don't even talk about the status of Vince and Linda's relationship in this one, which is, mystery number 1 to most fans. You don't really get a sense of what this family truly is about, We talk about the Trish Stratus, Mr. McMahon angle, and the documentary seemingly defending that no one had a problem with it at the time, and there's a heavy emphasis on how unusual the McMahons are, but that they're unusual, but also tight, and we use the word love quite a bit. Stephanie says she loves her brother. Vince said, he loved his dad. Shane says he loves his dad, but you never really see it. You never quite understand fully the complexity of these relationships that is always said that they have. I don't know. It's a weird episode, which really brought things down, at least for me. And episode 6 wraps things up with the documentary's thesis overall. Vince McMahon's departure from WWE was inevitable once the Wall Street Journal allegations started to drop, and the company is now better off without him. They touch on the power vacuum left by Vince's exit, framing the new era of WWE leadership as a fresh start. A company who is thriving in a post-Vince era despite his legendary imprint on its past. Yet, the documentary falls in the same trap of mythologizing Vince's empire building while leaving so much about the man himself left untouched and unsaid. Listen, if you're a die-hard wrestling fan, there's probably not a lot here that you haven't already heard. I've said this a couple of times, but it bears repeating. The storylines, the controversies, even the backstage dynamics of most of what we heard here have been covered in other documentaries, books, interviews, podcasts, newsletters. The information has been out there for a while. If you're a fan of Vince, though, I think the documentary won't change your mind. It paints him as a visionary genius who built an empire against all odds, right? There's nothing here that challenges that image. Despite touching on some of its darker moments, Vince, the man, the myth, will remain untouchable in the minds of his fans and supporters. On the flip side, if you're a Vince hater, there's equally little here to sway your opinion. The doc skirts around some of the most damning details. It's all things that you've heard about and make your blood boil, and you'd love to see Vince get his comeuppance for, but it never seems like we commit to that. The doc just leaves out enough to prevent any deep exploration of the controversies and the man who is behind them. Overall, at the end of the day, it's an exercise in maintaining the same narrative that has defined Vince McMahon for years. Larger than life figure whose complexities remain mostly untold. What you walk away with here depends largely on your opinion you walked in with. Those are my thoughts. I'm recording this on September the 27th, and there was one story that came out of the Observer today, of the Wrestling Observer on this day, that completely captivated and enthralled the imagination of wrestling fans everywhere, to the point that it got really annoying really fast, but nonetheless, it is out there, and that is that AEW is tacking on injury time to Rey Fénix's contract, which would end up being almost an extra year, right? Tony Khan made Fénix and Penta significant offers to stay, but they would not sign a new deal. That's the gist of it. That's what's come out of the Observer today regarding that, right? And this, of course, set up an entire firestorm of fans entrenching themselves into their positions. The haters, the lovers, the fans, the non-fans. Everyone had to take a side here. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to give you the best opinion. Mine. My opinion is the best. Okay, so essentially, like it's Fénix, right? Fénix is the guy who got the extra time tacked on to, so he could potentially be there till next summer 2025. And Penta's contract is coming up real soon, right? Real soon. So he could just go into WWE and get the signature, right? But is WWE interested in Penta as a singles guy? I would argue no. Maybe not. The main question that is just like going over everyone's mind, that everyone is going crazy cuckoo about, is did TK do the right thing? Did Tony Khan do the right thing here? A lot of people are saying yes, and a lot of people are saying no. There's really only two ways to go about this. Let's say he lets them go when their contracts expired and he didn't tack on any extra time, right? That would be very good for the talent. Obviously, it's very, very friendly to workers' rights, essentially, right? But that could also send a horrible message to your locker room saying, yeah, WWE can come in here anytime and just grab whoever they want and hit the brakes, and there's no consequences. They could start chatting with you while you're still under my employ, and that wouldn't be a problem. That's one way of approaching it. The other situation is what he did, which is to tack on extra time, and then your message is clear. Locker room, fellas, ladies, you can't just go negotiate and set things up with WWE while you're working for me. Or if you do, there will be consequences. But that really does stink for the talent. Like it's not the best move on that front. Had it been 2 years ago, and I really believe this, had it been 18 months, 2 years ago, something tells me we could have had a different outcome. I think Tony Khan could have kicked around the idea of releasing them. But in this context, right now, where he has... You remember there was a time he was a lot more mellow about WWE. You remember this? Where he was a lot more mellow, and he was like, look, if they want to talk, if they want to chat with us, and maybe, that's fine. And he had lent Brian Danielson for a video, right? He'd been very chill about a lot of stuff. But then since then, he's seen how WWE's trying to impede on him, not being very competitive, or at least being the Vince definition of competitive. He's been, he's mentioned recently about contract tampering, although we've talked about it, although maybe it's not exactly contract tampering. But, he's been annoyed at WWE sticking its nose in his business. He outright said, WWE's feeding false information out there and so on and so forth. I think that in this environment right now, there was no way he was just going to let Phoenix and Penta just head on out. I don't think there was any way, there was no way that he was going to let that happen. So, I think it's fair to be annoyed at Tony. I think it's fair to be angry at Tony for it, because a lot of people are saying, well, this is the kind of shit that WWE used to do, sure, absolutely. I think the contexts are very different. And I think, to a degree, I think when WWE would pull this stuff off, let's go back and think of one of the, I think one of the most egregious examples that is still in the mind of a lot of people. Let's say we think about Pac, right? When he had asked for his release and WWE said no, and they benched him, right? There was no reason for WWE to latch onto him and say, no, you're not going anywhere. You're not leaving. Well, because there was no major national competition. There was Impact TNA, but let's get real, right? There was no AEW at the time is the point. And what would Pac have done? Well, probably exactly what he did, right? Just pack up and head back to Dragon Gate for a bit. That's exactly what he did. And that has no implication on WWE's business whatsoever. It has no incident. They're just like completely different territories, completely different sets of fans, of mindsets. Like there was no reason, there was no true reason for them to hang on to Pac that long. And people who are trying to make that comparison, I think it's a bad comp. I think it's a terrible comp, in fact. Because in this circumstance here, you are in a talent war. You are angling for each other's top guys. So it's different. So I can understand where Tony's like, I'm not handing them these two dudes, especially since I might be handing them another guy like very, very soon. We're not doing that. So while fans were furious at WWE for, shelving Pac and not letting him perform and wrestle, there was no reason for them to hold on to him. Like zero reason. In the slightest. There was no reason to hang on to Pac. So if anything, it's more egregious. In this case, well, Tony just doesn't want to hand deliver some guys to WWE. So I get it. He's protecting his business. He's protecting how he conducts business with his locker room, with his talent. I think it's fine. But it really does suck for Penta, not for Penta, for Rey Fenix. And I can get behind that. I can absolutely get behind people who are upset that Tony Khan is doing this and just let the guy go. It's hard to disagree with that. It's really, really difficult to disagree with that position. But maybe the Lucha Brothers could have handled this in a different way as well. They could have handled this a lot better. They just walked into these negotiations, without, fully considering consequences, I guess. They could have just, they just started talking about going to WWE and heading there, and and they thought they would be just free to do it. According to reports, AEW was the last to know, was the last to find out about their intentions, right? And some of you are mentioning it in the chat, and that's important to point out here. There's a lot of finger pointing that can go, that could be done towards Conan and his wonderful podcast. I didn't know if you've heard it. He's implied on his podcast that he helped convince Penta and Phoenix to jump to WWE, and that he may have done it. He may have done it as payback for some slights, or some perceived slights that Tony Khan did upon his person. He's likely the guy who went around leaking news to Joey Votes that WWE is already producing masks and getting t-shirts done and all of that, and that they were signed. So, it's like, I think you have to, I don't think that was a very good move. Like, I think he blew their spot. He had this little vendetta against Tony Khan because probably Tony Khan didn't want to give him a job, just like Eric Bischoff didn't want to give him a job, just like all these big mad wrestling types who are mad at AEW they're probably just angry because Tony didn't want to give him a job. And this was his way of getting some little revenge, some little petty revenge, and it ended up blowing up his boys' plans. Personally, I think, you don't have to point the finger too far. He egged them on. They went after it. They weren't very smart about it. Let's be real. And Conan was absolutely not smart about it because he started practically bragging on his podcast that he was doing it. And again, no matter how much you want to point fingers at Conan, the Lucha Bros decided to do this, right? The Lucha Bros just went in there and they decided to go the course. They're grown-ass men. They made these decisions, whether they were pushed towards it or not. That was up to them. And I was reading on Lucha Blog today that apparently this isn't the first time that contract issues have plagued them. They've had similar troubles with Lucha Underground and AAA. They apparently always make decisions to make things very difficult. It's never really stopped them though. Like, it's never caused them any harm because they've always ended up being more successful, right? From AEW, from AAA / Lucha Underground, and then they move on to AEW, and now they're going to move on to WWE. Because regardless of what's happening here, here's the thing, is that they're likely going to end up in WWE, right? That's essentially what's going to happen here. They're going to go to WWE. They're ultimately going to win. It's just going to take a little more time for them to do it. But they're still coming out on top. They are going to get what they want, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I have no issue with guys moving around promotions, right? This is all just like incredibly funny drama. I like to think that my position is measured, where I'm able to see the pros and cons of both sides. I think ultimately, if I'm going very, very objectively speaking, I think in the purest, most rational way you can approach this, right? The most rational way. You're the owner. Your talent signs the contract. They know what they're getting into. It's not your fault if they didn't read the fine print. You're in a talent war with another company that says they don't perceive you as competition, yet they often act in ways that prove the contrary. So you, as the owner in this circumstance, I think you lock down your talent for as long as you can. I think it is the best possible solution, because then otherwise, at the same time, it sends a horrible message to anyone sticking around backstage. Just a terrible message to anyone sticking around backstage. So, and the Lucha Bros are going to get what they want, ultimately. Next summer, less than a year, they'll be fine. And they'll debut whichever way will be, in a grandiose way. And I promise, they're going to get over regardless. The Zero Miedo thing is going to, this Zero Miedo thing is the recipe to success in WWE. They're going to be fine. They're going to be absolutely fine. Can't even begin to tell you just how fine they're going to be. So there you go. So those were my thoughts on that situation. And ultimately, like I said, the most objective, I think, rational way of approaching this is that, AEW did what they had to do in the circumstances, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, not doing it to, now, does it suck that Rey Fenix is going to have to sit on the sidelines for a while? Yes, it does. From a purely emotional standpoint for a talent, it's not a good move. But they sort of painted themselves into this corner here, and Tony's reacting in the most business way possible. Why would he release talent that have been finagling behind his back to his competition that is trying to stomp him out? It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Well, then why don't we get into some contract and health news then? And we'll start with this little tidbit that comes to us courtesy of Ibu, the backup hangman over at Wrestle Purists, who on one of his shows this week said that Jay White is set to return to AEW imminently. Yeah, he had been sidelined with an injury, if I'm not mistaken, and that's it. He'd been sidelined with an injury, and he seems to be ready to go now, according to Ibu. So we can only hope that is the case. We can only hope that he really gets into it, and that he comes back, and that he's up to his full powers as well. That would really be tremendous. I really hope that works out. And he might just show up tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. Here's a bit of a contract situation here coming from Ibu, following up on news that Dave Meltzer brought down last week, saying that, or is it 2 weeks now? Yeah, it's 2 weeks. Saying that AEW was not quite as confident that Daniel Garcia was going to resign. Well, Ibu's coming back, saying that AEW is still confident Daniel Garcia will resign and have put together a creative for him in the event that he does. And, well, that makes a lot of sense. If you want to sign a guy, make sure he sticks around. You can flash a check at him, which is a good idea. You can show him all them zeros, but you also want to show that you have a plan for him. And I think having a plan is something that matters a lot to Daniel Garcia. I don't think he wants to get lost in the shuffle. Maybe he's seeing, maybe he sees some stuff happening. Maybe there's stuff going on backstage that we don't quite know. Maybe he's looking at, whatever it may be. The point is that perhaps for him, ensuring that there's a plan for him moving forward, that it won't just be these start-stops things, that there is a trajectory for Daniel Garcia. That would be exciting. You know what I'd do? I know I don't do much of the fantasy booking, but when it comes to this specifically and sports-based storytelling, which is what I advocate for, Daniel Garcia last year, his main issue was his identity crisis. He was looking to where he could fit in. He had come in, as a pure wrestler. Then he joined up with Jericho and he became a sports entertainer. And then the Jericho Appreciation Society fell apart. And then he was sort of left in limbo. Not quite sure where he was. Was he a wrestler or is he a sports entertainer? Who exactly is Daniel Garcia? And he went into the Continental Classic under that umbrella as well. And he underperformed, right? He didn't have a great, his matches were good. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I mean. In kayfabe, right? He underperformed. He didn't have the win. He had a losing record. But we all looked at this and was like, well, at least me anyway. This is part of his learning trajectory, essentially. And I was saying, well, next year he gets back into the Continental Classic and he has himself a better year. It's some very typical G1 booking when you have a young guy debut and his first year he's gonna stink, but then every year afterwards, he's gonna get built up a little more. He's gonna get some key wins. And eventually he's gonna get a win-loss record. Now, I'm not saying Tony should do long-term booking like Gedo does, because Gedo's insane and Americans don't have the patience for that. I'd say this year you have Garcia go all the way and make sure that he's in another group than Kazuchika Okada, so that they can face off one-on-one in the finals of the Continental Classic this year, and he wins the title. I think that would be tremendous. That would be a sweet ass elevation for him. And then he can head on back over against MJF. Maybe MJF, his thing is like, I'm going to win every singles title in AEW, which could be a thing. And then, rename them all or whatever. So there you go. Anyway, we're going to keep keeping an eye on this because, as you know, we are on Garcia watch here on the Mr. Warren Hayes show. Got to keep tabs on all of this. As soon as there's news, I will be here, for we are on Garcia watch. There's a lot of injury news. Do we have any? Here, Adam Cole is expected back in AEW soon, which is always the funniest kind of reports. It's like, Adam Cole is expected to return to his job. You don't say. These are always the funniest kinds of reports. Adam Cole may be returning sooner than later. Fightful Select reported on Monday, which would be the 30th, September 30. Reported on Monday that AEW is hopeful and even expecting Cole back sooner than later, and plans are being made for his eventual return as an on-screen character. Cole suffered a serious ankle injury last September at AEW's Grand Slam, which required 2 surgeries. The report did note that Cole was visiting people backstage earlier this month at All Out without the help of crutches or a walking boot. So there you go. That's good news. That is very, very, very good news. It's going to be an interesting little situation when Adam Cole comes back, because what are you going to do with the guy? What are you going to do with him? And because I find like what Adam Cole is going to need is like a complete refresher. We're gonna have to forget about the brochachos. Besides, it's been paid off, in my opinion, right? When MJF came back and what did he do? He brain busted him. I don't remember what he did, but that's been paid off, right? We're really done. If he comes back with the undisputed kingdom, I think that's a mistake. I think the Undisputed Kingdom right now should just like disband, if only to allow Roderick Strong to come back to the ring with End of Heartache. It's like that's your major. That's the one thing that I think is creating major heel heat right now. So what does Cole do? Right? Come back and just, I don't know who said that. I can't remember who said this. Was someone in the chat yesterday? Or if I read it, look, someone said this. It's not an original thought, but I'm going to pass it on. Nonetheless, just Adam Cole should come back and leave the Ring of Honor memories behind. Like, just leave it all. Just leave it all behind. There's no point for. There's no point in keeping, Adam Cole together with his old buddies and making sure that everyone stays really chummy chum. It's like there's no point. There's no point. No undisputed elite. Nothing. No, it's like he needs something completely fresh. I think that's how it's going to work. I know he's there with all his pals and he probably wants to work with his pals because they're his pals, and I get it, but I'm hoping they have some good creative for him, because there's a lot of people who are waiting for him to get back, with their fist and balled up into their hand, cracking their knuckles. They're just waiting. They're just waiting to trounce him completely. We'll see how that turns out. But if anything, I'm always happy when I hear that wrestlers who were in a bad spot, health-wise, come back. They're ready to go. They're healthy again. That is always good news. Killswitch / Luchasaurus hospitalized with pneumonia in both lungs. Brian Alvarez has confirmed a Fightful Select report from Monday that the AEW star is currently hospitalized with pneumonia in both lungs and is on oxygen. According to the report, Killswitch fiance found him collapsed on Friday, where he was rushed to the hospital. There they found his oxygen below 80%. It was also mentioned that he was days away from suffering permanent damage to his lungs. It's so bad. According to the report, he was told to expect a recovery time of over a month. It remains unclear when he will be able to return to in-ring action. I mean, pneumonia is bad enough as it is. Both your lungs, double pneumonia? Jesus Christ. Can you imagine? Fiance walks in, finds him on the floor, just completely freaks, loses her mind. I don't know if this came on suddenly, or, if he was fighting something, pushing through it. No, I got to make the town. No time to be checked out. Pneumonia can be a bitch, right? It's not necessarily something that takes a long time to develop. It can creep up on you pretty quickly. I mean, I hope he's okay. I hope he continues to be okay. Best wishes, speedy recovery. That's kind of shocking. That's really kind of shocking. What are the odds Christian cuts a promo on this? Would it be in too bad of taste? No. No. I think he'd be fine with it. Christian would go right ahead. And Killswitch, I think, would be completely okay with it. The thing is that a lot of wrestlers, as long as they're mentioned and that, there's stuff that they can use to get themselves over, they're fine. And I'm sure he'd be like, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them are just okay with people doing this kind of weird shit that normal people like us go, we sort of put the tips of our fingers up to our, what is this? Is this a sternum? I don't know, but what do I know about biology? We'll just let out a little gasp. Can't believe he said that. He's actually, he could have died. It's just awful. Here's some suck news. Ilya Dragunov has been sidelined with a torn ACL. That really does suck. During Monday's Raw, it was announced that Dragunov tore his ACL during a house show match this weekend in Columbus, Georgia, where he lost to Gunter in a match that had been for the World Heavyweight Championship. Joe Tessitore on commentary said that Dragunov is now expected to be out 6 to 9 months, which is the typical the typical amount of time that you get sidelined with an ACL. That really sucks. I think I feel like the WWE universe at large were getting a feel for old Dragunov, catching up with the rest of the planet. I think he's been doing good work, and he, obviously feuding with the Gunther these days is good, because Gunther is perceived as a major act. Don't want to say a top guy. He's not there yet, but you know, he's one of those. He's one of those upper crust guys on Raw. Yeah, it does suck because Dragunov is so incredibly good, and you can only hope that he's more on the 6-month end of recovery than the 9-month. Hope he can get back to it real soon. That he doesn't miss too much time. Wardlow is out due to a knee injury, according to Matt Taven. That's why he hasn't been around on TV. During a podcast appearance, Taven said that Wardlow is currently out because of that said knee injury, but didn't give any details as to the severity or when it was suffered. He said he believed that Wardlow is, quote unquote, just trying to figure out what the best kind of treatment plan is to get back on track with that knee. The 36-year-old hasn't competed. Wardlow is 36? Wardlow is 36 years old? I did not realize that. I thought he was younger. I thought he was really younger than that. 36. He hasn't competed since this past March's big business edition of Dynamite, losing to Samoa Joe. The month prior, it was feared he suffered a torn meniscus in a bout with Commander, but he did wrestle 3 times after that, including the aforementioned Joe match. So maybe he did get an injury and he worked through it like a dope. Maybe he did do that, and he aggravated it because he's a wrestler brain. He's got wrestler brain. He's a big old dumb old jock. I can do this. That's not a problem. It's a shame that he's injured. I hope he gets back on his feet literally soon. We wish him the best, of course. Wardlow's in this weird place, right? He's in this very strange spot where it's, what do you do with Wardlow, right? It's, the wave clearly passed for him. With the MJF thing, that whole MJF era, that whole bit with MJF when he was threatening to leave the company and all that, and I kind of feel like it didn't do Wardlow any favors, and it was all very oddly booked, and they just haven't been able to recapture anything for Wardlow. So, and I don't think becoming like the heavy of the Undisputed Kingdom, which I have no use for. I think they're a bit of a waste of time. I don't think becoming the heavy of the group was necessarily a really interesting way to keep him alive. I don't know. El Hijo del Vikingo is returning from injury, unfortunately at AAA, but you can't win them all. One victory at a time. Don't be greedy here, folks. You can't win them all at once. You gotta leave some. You gotta leave some for dessert here. Vikingo wrestled his first match in over 7 months this weekend. The 27-year-old took part in AAA's tapings on Sunday in Monterey. He teamed with Laredo Kid and Octagon Jr. in a win over Belsegur Torus, not that Torus, and Emperador Azteca. Good little team there. Octagon Jr., Laredo Kid, and him. That's a fun little trios, and putting him in a trios is a good idea too, because then at the same time he doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. He doesn't have to put too much strain on that injury. Good for him. Vikingo had been out of action since having surgery in February for a torn meniscus and ruptured ligament. He suffered the injury in a match for AULL on February 17. The former AAA Mega Champion is also booked on an upcoming GLEAT show in Japan, which is a promotion that does not exist. He is scheduled to team with Sama Watanabe against Ricochet and Shima on Sunday, October 5th in Osaka. That match just doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. That is impossible. It is an impossible match. What the hell? It does not exist. Soma Watanabe, Ricochet and Shima and Vikingo, I'll admit, that's impossible. GLEAT does not exist. House of Gloria has also announced that Vikingo will wrestle Nick Nemeth on its show on October 18. Nick Nemeth is no longer the mega champion, right? They gave it back to Alberto the Boss, right? Didn't they? That's how much I keep up with AAA. Chat, help me out here. Because I'm sure that the plan would have been for Nemeth and Vikingo to go for it, right? Alberto did beat Nemeth, thank you. You know, I'm sure that was the plan at some point. So they're probably going to have that match. Well, they're going to have that match at Amazing Red's place instead of in AAA. So I mean, that's fine. That's good. Good for him. I'm legitimately happy that he's coming back. What I'm looking for in a Vikingo return, this is what I'm looking forward to. This is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that he will lay off a little of the incredible feats of athleticism and high-flying chicanery that he does. Because and not in a sense where I'm like saying, slap on a hold, kid. That's not it. It's, I think towards the end, as we were getting closer towards the injury, as if that there was something put in time. But before the injury, maybe that's a better way to put it. Yeah, it is. Before the injury, I was kind of getting sick of Vikingo matches because they were fun, but then there was the element of, okay, but what are we trying to say? What is the match that we're trying to put together here? You know, when you hear Vikingo was doing what a lot of Young Bucks detractors used to say, when they say they're just spot monkeys, they just do spots. That's what Vikingo was doing towards the end before his injury. He was just doing spots and not necessarily connecting with a match in and about itself, if that makes sense. So if Vikingo returns, I hope that this injury sort of forces to ground him a bit. Again, not because I don't want him to do cool flippy shit. I am pro cool flippy shit, but I'm mostly pro good wrestling matches that tell a really compelling story, which is what I was really growing out of love with in regards to Vikingo. Is that a good sentence? I don't know. I just rambled off here. I want Vikingo to have good wrestling matches, well-structured matches, well put together, well thought out, as opposed to him just doing really cool shit. How about do it both? Do really cool shit, but have a really good match on top of that. Because he can't always be wrestling Kenny Omega. And yes, I want Will Ospreay versus Vikingo. Like, who doesn't, right? Like, there's a lot of great opportunities that are opening up here. It's good news. It's good stuff. But you have to wonder, right? With the tension between Tony Khan and Conan, how is this going to affect, working relationships that, even with CMLL, right? But CMLL seems to be pretty chill, where they're like, as long as our wrestlers don't wrestle on the same card or wrestle each other or something like that, or both, it's fine. You can work with AAA. We're okay with that. I wonder how that's going to affect this type of match here. This eventual match, or any eventual matches that Vikingo can have with AEW talent. Stay tuned. I mean, look, we don't know what happened backstage. Maybe Julia was copping an attitude today. Maybe she was like, over the past couple of weeks, she's been coming in here like the queen, and she's got to get knocked down a couple of pegs. Right, Shawn Michaels, HBK, Nikita Lyons coming back. She made an in-ring return at WWE NXT house show over the weekend. Who knows? She might just show up at one of these big shows. At an NXT house show in Davenport, Florida on Friday. Friday being, I don't know. I don't have my calendar anymore. I've switched to October now, so I don't know the dates anymore. That'd have been the 27th, the 26th, 27th, something like that. Who cares? Lions teamed with Dante Chen and won a mixed tag match. This was her first match since January when she lost to Blair Davenport on NXT television. So isn't that interesting that she lost to Blair Davenport but made her return in Davenport, Florida? Wow. The last 2 years have been tough for Lions, who has been spent much of that time injured, doing TikToks and wearing MAGA hats. No, that wasn't in the article. That was a little improvisation on my end. I was just feeling the vibe. It's a little ad-libbing. You know, it's like, whose line is it anyway? You know, all right, people in the audience, give me a place, a thing, and the name of your grandmother. Let's go. I'm feeling it. After being out for nearly all of 2023, she made a return in December of last year, wrestling a few times before suffering an ACL injury in January. Lyons wrote about her recovery recently on X. It's been a minute, 8 months post-op on my left ACL. Now I'm even, LMAO. Yeah, because both, she's part of the knee brace brigade times 2. It's not over when you fall. It's over when you don't get back up and just quit. No one knows all you've been through but you. Take your power back and protect your peace. That's so weird. People, anyway. It has been a long time since Nikita Lyons, right? And we all know why she got over. And it's not because she was particularly interesting or dashing in the ring. I legitimately wonder if she will be able to recapture anything she had, because I legitimately believe that Nikita Lyons got over, because she got over during the pandemic, right? Because people were just excited for anything that, you know, got them going, just anything that would break out of the norm. And Nikita Lyons definitely, she definitely pops off the screen, if you know what I'm talking about. And I wonder if the novelty has passed now. I feel like NXT has developed past her, if that's weird. Like if we're still in the same spot, she might come back completely repackaged and you know, they have something outstanding for her waiting. But I just look at where NXT is at today versus where it was 4 years ago. Where does Nikita Lyons fit in? Like, does she still have, how does she stand out outside of her natural charisma? How does she stand out? Because I feel like she actually ushered in like a certain look that's expected from the women on NXT. I don't know if she's that unique anymore, is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, if people want to people haven't been waiting for her to come back to get horny on Maine, because they have Rhea Ripley and then they have Liv Morgan and you know, the doofus son, Dominic, doing whatever it is they're doing. So, you know what I mean? Like, there was a novelty to her. I'm not quite sure what it is, because she's a very mid wrestler. And I know not a lot of people like to hear that. A lot of people like to think she's very good because she does kickboxing videos, you know, and she punches really fast, you know, not unlike Shane McMahon. Just, I don't know why I thought of Shane McMahon punches. Like, she's a very mid wrestler. Again, like, that doesn't necessarily matter in NXT, but look, I don't watch the week to week. I only watch the PLE, so I'll see how she stands out over there. You know, that is, unless she blows out her knees again or whatever the fuck. Like, she just might be snake bitten too. Here we got contract news. A little bit of contract news. Saraya reportedly re-signed with AEW for 1 year. Okay. The former AEW Women's World Champion Saraya, they'll never let us live that one down, has reportedly re-signed a 1 year deal to stay with AEW, according to Fightful. The outlet reported AEW had an option year, but this new deal that runs until September 2025 may have been a separate agreement. After her WWE contract expired in July 2022, the former Paige debuted in AEW in September 2022 at that year's Grand Slam. Jesus, she's been with the company for 2 years? It feels like 10, and the company's 5 years old. And then returned to the ring 2 months later at Full Gear, picking up a win over Britt Baker in a really bad match. I'm sorry, again, I'm improvising here. That's not in the article. It was her first in-ring action in nearly 5 years due to what was thought to be a career-ending injury, neck injury in WWE. It's kind of peculiar. Isn't that kind of odd? Like a 1-year deal? Isn't that kind of unique? Isn't that kind of unique? Kind of out of, out of nowhere type of thing. I really don't. I really don't see the. I really don't see the upside in Saraya. I don't see it. I don't know what she brings to the table. I don't think she's a particularly good worker. You know, I saw the plunder match that she did with Jamie Hayter on Collision, and you know, it's very bog standard. You know, bucking against the tradition of great AEW women hardcore matches. This was not it. You know, like she's sort of painted herself into a corner. Sure, her talking isn't that great. You know, it's like I'm really not sold on her, and I know I'm not alone. And I think this comes a bit as a surprise. A 1-year agreement seems so odd. It seems so specific, and I was trying to figure out, well, what's the deal? You know, because you know. I know we were joking in the chat talking about ambassador to the UK, but you know, they're not running. They're going to be running Forbidden Door next year in the UK. They're not doing a Wembley show, or at least they're not doing All In. I don't know. Forbidden Door might be Forbidden Door is not at Wembley, right? They didn't announce the venue, and it's probably not going to be at Wembley, right? That's the thing. It's kind of strange. It's kind of strange. I don't quite get it. I like I said, I tried to figure out why 1 year. Why 1 year? And I can't put my finger on it. I don't understand. Like, she's the type of talent that if WWE wants her back, please, she's all yours, kind of thing. It's not as if she's been setting the world on fire. You know, she brought in Zach Zodiac to AEW to much ado about nothing. I think she's been a net negative. She has been she's on a list of bad hires for AEW. I'm convinced they were expecting something else. I'm convinced they're doing something else. I'm convinced they were expecting something else from her. But that's not what they got. Why don't we give ourselves a preview of Bad Blood 2024, which is happening this weekend on October 5th, 2024, from the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. A big WWE pay-per-view that has Drew McIntyre and CM Punk on the poster. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, when I'm starting to look for words like poster, when I'm like, wait, what's the word again for the sign that you make with the name of your show and you put pictures on it of the people who are on the show? Poster. Yeah, that's it. From what I can tell, because you never quite know, there's 5 matches announced so far on the official, I should say, on the announced for the show. Knowing WWE B shows, this will probably be it. Is there a possibility that we might get a 6 match? I don't think so, right? Usually Paul Levesque pay-per-views are usually 5. For the B shows, they're 5 match affairs, right? And I mean, look, people were so excited for, here's a spoiler alert if you were really excited, for the Jey Uso Intercontinental Championship run. He's not on the show. He's not booked for the show. So deal with it. Let's take a look. Let's preview it again. You know, and I'll tell you, like I spoke about a couple of weeks ago on the last podcast where I broke down, what was the last show? It was the No Mercy, and was it SummerSlam? I think it was SummerSlam, right? The last show, SummerSlam and No Mercy. And I was telling y'all, look, I don't know if I'm still going to do this because I feel nothing watching WWE shows. So yeah, I just want to make sure that you all understand that it's still an inner monologue that I have. I'm still not like 100% invested in World Wrestling Entertainment. I still don't think it's something that makes me feel nothing. But I'm still not sure if I just want to toss it aside. I'm not sure if I want to forget about WWE and never speak on it again. I don't know if that's smart. I don't know if that's like doing a disservice to what I do, to like ignore the market leader. It doesn't quite make sense. But at the same time, there's so much wrestling out there that I can watch that makes me feel stuff that I want to watch more of. CMLL is the first example that comes to mind. That actually, hits me in all the right spots that I really enjoy. I'd like to watch more Joshi, for instance, but there's only so many hours in a day. And quite frankly, until this YouTube endeavor becomes self-sufficient and I can let go of all of my other work-related responsibilities with my normal job, that I don't see that happening. I don't see me watching more wrestling while also watching WWE. Does that make sense? Because there's only so many hours in a week. There's only so much I can do. And I got to make these choices. So that's why last time for the last set of pay-per-views, I was a little bummed out. I was a little down. I'm not saying like I'm hopping up, super excited, bouncing off the walls at the idea of Bad Blood this weekend, but we'll see. I don't even know what the order is. I don't know what the main event is. Let's just look. We'll start with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns versus the Bloodline. Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns came to an understanding in an empty football stadium that everything was going to be okay. I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, this match is setting up. This match is setting up War Games. I hope everyone is clear about that, right? This idea that that they're mortal enemies, right? They're mortal enemies, these two, and they have to band together to fight off the Bloodline. Does Roman want control back of the Bloodline? I don't know. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Solo Sikoa is like the least convincing mob boss in the history. Like I said, back in the day, was it? I think it was at the SummerSlam review that I said that Solo Sikoa is probably the worst mob boss since John Travolta and Gotti. Like this, he's not convincing. He's not a top guy. He doesn't come across as a top guy. He's going to be teaming with Jacob Fatu in this match against Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. And Jacob has so much more to offer, so much more charisma and presence. And WWE knows it. You want to know why they know it? Because they actually have Jacob Fatu and Roman Reigns stand across from each other in the ring so that they can have a crowd reaction, so they can start gauging, oh, maybe we should be focusing on these two instead. Like, they know what they have with Jacob at this point. I think the best thing, because I know, Randy Orton and Kevin Owens have all been giving like their thumbs up to Cody to team with Roman. They've made all their lives so miserable, and they're like, maybe even have they been giving their thumbs up begrudgingly? Maybe, you got to do what you got to do, kind of thing. Look, here's the thing. Let's just read the recap off of Wikipedia real quick. On night 2 of WrestleMania XL in April, Cody Rhodes defeated Roman Reigns to win the undisputed WWE Championship in a bloodline. Okay, well, we're going a little too far. Because we have the Temu bloodline and all that. Let's go to SummerSlam. At SummerSlam, Rhodes defeated Sikoa in a bloodline rules match to retain the title after interference from a returning Reigns. On the September 13 episode of SmackDown, Rhodes successfully defended the title against Sikoa once again, this time in a steel cage match. Following the match, Rhodes was attacked by the bloodline, which prompted Rhodes to come out and assist Rhodes. Later that night, Sikoa proposed a tag team match with himself and Fatu against Rhodes and Reigns at Bad Blood. Excuse me. Rhodes initially declined, stating that his feud with the bloodline was over. Later, Reigns addressed the fans and stated that he did not need Rhodes' help as it was family business. Rhodes appeared, seemingly teasing a title rematch between himself and Reigns. However, both were ambushed by the bloodline. Rhodes and Reigns subsequently signed the contract, thus making the tag team match official for Bad Blood. So essentially, the bloodline fucked up. The only reason that Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns are now like, the mega powers at this point, they're doing a team up, is it's Homelander. It's Homelander and Billy Butcher here. The only reason we're seeing that is because the bloodline fucked up, because they attacked both of them, giving them both reason to be a tag team. If I'm backstage and I'm listening to these promos, and Cody's like, I don't want to team with you, so on and so forth, I'm Solo Sikoa and I'm going, hang on, boys. Let's just let this go. But no, since Solo Sikoa is a terrible leader, he ran in and attacked and created the situation for he's the architect of his own demise here. Anyway, I'm sure people are interested in this match. I'm not invested in the bloodline stuff, so this means nothing to me, Cody's a good performer. Like, Cody's my favorite guy in the match. I'm excited to see what Jacob Fatu is going to do in this type of spot. And that's it. And maybe the match will be good. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's going to turn into, community theater time, and there's just going to be tons of interference. Like, that's what I'm expecting. And then, see, it's like I predicted months ago. Roman Reigns comes back and he's going to do a War Games with Cody, and he's going to with Cody and Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. It's going to be those four guys against whatever combination of the Temu bloodline you have, excluding Tongaloa because he stinks. That's what we're looking for. Maybe they'll go 5-on-5 and throw in Jey Uso. Didn't I read that Jimmy Uso was ready too? It's going to be a big feel-good moment where they're going to bring back the old bloodline back together, and they're going to team with their old foes, because everyone hates the Temu bloodline, and the Temu bloodline are just a bunch of, they're just a bunch of wee babies, and they're all going to get squashed. And it's not like, it should be over by now, right? It should be done. Just Roman finish this, you know what I mean? And then he's gonna win the Royal Rumble. I hope everyone sees where this is going, right? And then Roman Reigns wins the Royal Rumble. Nia Jax versus Bayley for the WWE Women's Championship. Didn't I not hate Nia Jax versus Bayley? I don't remember. And by not hate, I'm not saying, oh, it was a good match. Definitely not saying that. Like, I don't remember. But this is the thing. It's like, because, and there's stuff with Tiffany Stratton. Look, it doesn't matter. It's okay. It's fine. Like, I don't think this is going to be really good. Just as simple as that. Damian Priest versus Finn Balor. Again, I'm not invested in the Judgment Day. Couldn't tell you. I just know that everyone's mad at each other, and Damian Priest was kicked out, and Finn Balor's a little prick, and that's all. I mean, that's fine. There's probably going to be a ton of interference in this one too. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, these matches don't do anything for me, and I think Damian Priest is a fine little wrestler. I think Finn Balor is turning into a shadow of who he used to be. There you go. I don't know what you want from me. Liv Morgan is going to be defending the Women's World Championship against Rhea Ripley, and Dominic Mysterio is going to be suspended over the ring in a shark cage. Ah, yes, those great legendary shark cage matches in the history of WWE. Shame. And I mean, again, look, this is stuff that you have to be into to get excited about this. I thought their SummerSlam match, Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan was I didn't think it was very good, because there was no way I was into that. Right? I'm pretty sure it was an angle disguised as a match, is what it was. And I think I have it on hand, not too far. Or is it in my other book? August 3rd. No, I should be okay here. That's New Japan stuff. That's still the G1. AEW. Oh, 5-star match here. Ah, yes, Kaito Kiyomiya versus Ryohei Oiwa. The headlock match. If you haven't seen that match, it's absolutely tremendous. AEW. Where's the SummerSlam? The Summerfest. Where is the Summerfest? Can't do Control F here. Oh, here it is. There we go. I gave it 2.5. And the story is that Dom kept Rhea Ripley from using a chair. Why would Rhea Ripley do it in the first place since she had won? Yeah, exactly. Anyway, the point is that they had all the nonsense. It was just an angle disguised as the match, and they're probably going to do the same thing. People really like the Dominic stuff. They're doing Dominic toilet paper with his face on it, like it's 2002, right? Back when people started printing stuff on toilet paper, and you'd have later on you'd have George W. Bush toilet paper. You remember that? And then everyone thought that was really funny and or sacrilegious. And it's like Liv is being lewd about it online, and people are going, cook, and and I'm like, this is all stuff that doesn't interest me. It takes away from the wrestling, and people say, no, these are the stories, this is the great stuff. No, it takes the stuff. It takes away from the match. It overshadows the match. It's too much. It's dumb. I don't know. I don't have high hopes for this match. And of course, CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre in a Hell in a Cell match. Somehow, people are thinking that this is going to be brutal and violent. Somehow, people think that this is going to be a terrifying experience. Let's not forget the last time Phil Brooks promised us that there was going to be unbridled violence in a match. He ended up fighting over a charm bracelet. This is going to be Baby's first Hell in a Cell, right? This is essentially what it's going to be. I don't know why people are excited about this, unless somehow they start approving the use of blood and being really, really violent. But the last time I remember seeing a Hell in a Cell match was Edge and Finn Balor. And Finn Balor's head got split open so bad in the Hell in a Cell that they had to pause the match to patch him up and keep the cameras away from all of this while Edge looked for plunder. While the medics patched him up with like super glue or whatever to make sure that the bleeding stopped before they continued. So they had to stop the bleeding in a Hell in a Cell, this match, which is supposed to be like this career-ending thing that could decimate you in a second. No, a guy is bleeding in Hell in a Cell. I gotta patch that up. I'm not expecting anything special out of this. There might be. Here's what I think is going to happen. Okay. Here's what I think might happen. I think WWE might let CM Punk and Drew McIntyre do some things that contravene from the overall taboos that you can't do in a WWE ring, right? Like both guys running the razor. But they'll let them do this one thing. Maybe they'll even do a glass spot, with some sugar glass, right? Maybe they'll do something that is typically banned from WWE matches so that people will go, oh my God, they did it. They did this thing. And, but this one thing, because they see what's happening in AEW. They know what's going on. They see the Hangman swerve matches, They see the violence. They see how they see how people like it, and probably there's probably a bunch of the wrestlers are like, man, can't we do this, Hunter? No. No. Yeah. So that's what I think they're gonna do. They're gonna do one thing that challenges the taboo things that you're not supposed to do in a WWE match, and people are going to lose their mind, and it's going to be like this progressive change for WWE. Everyone's going to be like, oh, it's so good. They got violent. They did the thing, because otherwise, it's going to be a plunder match in a cage, and the cage is not going to matter. It's so hard to get excited for this stuff. Anyway, that's it. Preview completed. Happening this weekend, October 5th. I guess I'll review it, right? I guess we'll review it. It is now time to break down the New Japan Pro Wrestling Destruction in Kobe show that happened on September 29, 2024. Of course, in Kobe, Japan, at the Kobe World Hall. Now, was it a big deal, Warren? Did the masses turn out for this? Well, 4,528 people showed up in Kobe Hall to watch the show. Is that good, Warren? Well, if we are to compare from the last time that New Japan was in the building, which was last year for another Destruction in Kobe show, they put in 4,000, that would have been a tremendous uptick, 4,212 people. The main event here this year was Great Okan versus Tetsuya Naito. Last year was Will Ospreay versus Yota Tsuji in an absolute top-notch barn burner, an absolutely extraordinary match. Other than that, there was a Tetsuya Naito versus Jeff Cobb as the co-main event, whereas this year it was Dave Finlay versus Yoshihashi, of course. And it's good, right? I think the last time, more than in fact, not more than I think, in fact, we'll get to it. The last time that New Japan was in the building that drew over 5,000 people, because this is an 8,000 seat capacity venue, right? It's one of these multi-purpose venues. It's not specifically an arena or whatnot. So you can seat about 8,000 people in there. They did 6,454 all the way back in 2018 for another Destruction in Kobe show, this time main evented by Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Kazuchika Okada, arguably one of the last great ones that the two had, and a tremendous match with Kushida versus Bushi. I think that was around the time where the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title was vacant. So those were the two matches that wrapped up the card on that date. So this is a good number for New Japan. Again, it's been doing, and there's a slight progression over last year. It's like 500 in attendance difference, right? It's like 500 tickets more this year. So we're in the same venue, we're in the same boat. But it's interesting because if you take a look at Dragon Gate, who from what I can tell is the only other promotion that has run Kobe World Hall this year. Their festival, the Pro Wrestling Festival, drew 4,795 people this year for an event that they held in July, right? And New Japan here, they had 4,528. So again, we're in the same vicinity. It's nothing, we're in the same vicinity for 200. A difference of 200 isn't notable. But if we go back to last year, Dragon Gate did 5,150 people for the Pro Wrestling Festival. And they've always scored high in Kobe Hall because, Kobe's their stomping grounds, right? So one would assume that they would be able to draw easier, bigger houses. But this year they're pretty much on the same footing as New Japan. I thought that to be interesting because that's more of a remarkable, a noticeable, maybe not remarkable, but a noticeable drop for Dragon Gate as opposed to last year, whereas New Japan did a slight did a slight improvement. It was just a little bit higher. Like I said, Kobe is that's where Dragon Gate is headquartered. It's their place. It's their thing. That's where they operate out of. So it's to be expected that they draw bigger crowds. It's interesting that they're very close on par with New Japan this year. And again, it's not a bad attendance. Often you'll hear talk about how, attendance for Japanese promotions, but let's stick with New Japan here. Attendance for New Japan shows still haven't reached, pre-pandemic eras as things used to be, essentially. This is a good example here. This is a good example. If we go all the way back to 2018, where they draw over 6,000 people in the building, we're still quite a ways away. And you had some big people in the main event. Are we still lacking the stars? Are we still lacking the dynamics that make New Japan interesting, and then that people will want to pile up on top of each other to come see a show like it was once in the past? Maybe. We hear it all the time. The company's in a reconstruction phase. We're out of COVID and so on and so forth. And it is going to take some time. There are decisions being made, some that were made on this show to try and reinvigorate the roster, the lineup. That's something that they have a little more control over. If you're able to build your stars, especially new ones that audiences will get attached to, well, that's what you should be focusing on. Hopefully, this will continue down that trend, a trend that sort of kind of started with the G1, with Zack Sabre Jr. winning the G1. That's not that Zack Sabre Jr. is a young man by any stretch of the imagination, but if anything, he's fresh for the main event picture, and that's That's what New Japan needs. It needs the freshness. It needs new ideas, new people, just new stuff to put forward to try and get more people in the building. Because the old guard is either gone or is slowly going away. But yeah, that's a discussion, of course, that we've had on previous occasions. I had it throughout my G1 daily coverage this year. Now we're going to talk about the Kobe show, Destruction in Kobe, that happened this weekend. I thought this was a good show, a very good show on top of that. I have minimal quibbles with this show. I was thoroughly entertained, thoroughly entertained. I thought that I thought that the matches that would be a little iffy ended up over delivering. I see, at least of course we're talking about for the business side of the card, right? When we're talking like the top 4 matches or so, those are the ones that really do interest you. You know, you don't get hype for one of these shows because of, you know, the opening 6-man that has Tomoaki Hanma wrestling in it, right? You get hype for what's coming up down the card, and it did a fantastic job. The top of the card did a fantastic job at just delivering the goods, providing a real entertaining, dramatic series of matches. I was super into it. I thought this was a very, very good show. We got some surprises throughout as well. I mean, you know, there's things that have been set up for the immediate future for the King of Pro Wrestling show. There's a lot to love here. I don't have a problem with it. Let's just get to it. Let's start talking about it. We'll start by start by the main event and work our way down. You know, I don't think you're chomping at the bit to hear me give my impressions on LIJ versus United Empire. We'll go with the main event, where Tetsuya Naito successfully retained the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship by defeating the Great Khan. I thought this was a very, very good match. I was surprised at how much I liked it. And I know these guys had a pretty good match during the G1. I thought this one was better. But one thing was constant though. When I thought back to the G1 match and I look back to this one here, these two dudes have really good chemistry. Like there's no two ways to really try to wrap your head around it. Like they just work really, really well together. And it showed that Naito was in complete confidence with what Great Khan was doing. And as I talked about on my preview, I was wondering whether or not Great Khan would be in a position where he could truly guide a match for Naito, right? And set the tone, set the pace, and he did. This was a Great Khan match that Tetsuya Naito wrestled. So maybe this is one of the reasons why it went so well, because it was very ground-based, a lot of submissions and locks and whatnot that were involved, and that kept Naito from having to resort to using more of his typical high-flying mobile offense, which is a little rougher to get going these days. Now, Naito had to answer with a ground game of his own, which and chain wrestling in and out of submissions. I thought this was tremendous, and he even pulled out a couple of old standards. We got to see the Puma Blanca in this one. Like this was very, very good. And the fact that Great Khan was able to guide the pace here was like, okay, well, good for him, first of all, but it also helped Naito tremendously. I don't want to say that they did this to absolutely mask Tetsuya Naito's deficiencies these days, but I'll strongly imply it because I think this truly was like the best possible opponent for a one-on-one, just like Zach is going to be in a couple of weeks. I think this was the best possible opponent for Tetsuya Naito, because he doesn't have to be extremely physical. He just has to work a solid, well thought out ground game. We're not expecting him to bounce everywhere across the ring, and he can maintain. He can still wrestle, still do something very good, and can maintain like the big physical feats. Like big match Naito can come out, can be saved, and can come out at Wrestle Kingdom, considering, if that is the plan, right? Because the plan's not as clear as it has been over the past couple of years. If it is indeed the plan to have Naito wrestling in the main event at Wrestle Kingdom, well, then there is absolutely the possibility for him to save main event Naito for that, to not go too hard, in these preliminary, not these preliminary matches, but the matches on the road to Wrestle Kingdom. I don't think these opponents are. I think these opponents are well picked. I think they've been chosen purposefully, because both are going to have solid ground games. We're not going to be expecting, high flying affairs or, massive brawls. It's groundwork, and Naito shows that he can still keep up. He can still do that. So again, I don't want to say, I'm not trying to pile on to the idea, oh, Naito's washed. Absolutely not. All I'm saying is that these are smart opponents to book him, to preserve him physically for when he will be needed to deliver, which will likely be at the Tokyo Dome in the main event. Because he can still do it, because we've seen him pull great performances out of the air, just as much as there's some matches where it's just like, my God, he's washed, we're done. We have still seen Tetsuya Naito on a few choice occasions pull out the old magic and just stun us all with a great wrestling match. And I think they're saving that. I think this is their way of putting him in bubble wrap, but not keeping him off the shows. Because you could be saying, well, Warren, if they want to protect him so bad, take him off the shows. But Tetsuya Naito is the only true legitimate draw that this company has. And when I say legitimate, I'm not saying that the others are not draws. What I mean by legitimate is that you can point to where there's a pattern, and you can point to and you say, every time that this guy is on the is in the main event or whatever, it adds more butts in the seats. You can see that when he's not, attendance goes down, but when he's in a top position, attendance goes up. That's Tetsuya Naito. So when you're in a position, if you agree with me with my statement earlier, if you're in a position where New Japan is in a reconstruction phase and still trying to get back to pre-pandemic levels when it comes to their attendance, well, that you gotta put your draw. You gotta put him in the main event. You gotta put the guy who actually draws the tickets and puts the butts in seats. So you can't just set him aside and put him on ice until it's time to defrost him for the main event. You cannot do that. And the one thing that is also important to keep in mind in Japanese pro wrestling as opposed to North American pro wrestling, as far as I know, the business is still strongly built around attendance, where there's actual people in the building. They don't have the benefit of these cuckoo crazy media deals like WWE and likely AEW have access to. These deals where if you're not drawing as many people in the building, where you don't really care because you've got guaranteed millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that are just, going to be deposited into the checking account, and so you're going to be fine. So whether you're drawing 200 people or 20,000 people, the money's coming in anyways. Japan doesn't have that luxury. These promotions still are very much dependent on their attendance. So maybe that's why I'm harping a little harder on it than I would. I mean, I still harp hard on it when I talk about AEW because I still but for other reasons. It's mostly for vibes, for aesthetic reasons. For as a barometer of popularity and stuff. A good consumer-facing key performance indicator, right? As opposed to, AEW is going to be, not if the deal comes through. Well, when the deal comes through, when the deal is announced, is what I'm trying to say. We just have to come to grips that the deal is happening, folks. I harp on it with AEW because of those reasons. Because, I think that empty arenas deflate your live audience. It deflates the talent as well. They're not quite as excited to perform in front of when they're in a basketball arena that is like an eighth full. They're not into that. It definitely affects the vibes for the viewing audience as well. Because if the live audience on TV doesn't come across as being super hot, then you're not going to get that vibe. And it affects production. It's just not a great feeling. You want your product to feel hot. You want it to come across as hot. Well, the best way to do that is to have a rabid, full packed arena, whether it be 8,000, 10,000, or 15,000 people. Or you just want it packed, right? That's why I get hard on AEW because, there's a question of perception. In New Japan, you got to be, or in Japan, for New Japan, and in Japan in general, you have to be hard on them because, or a little more critical, a little more analytical, and you have to press on it a little more when you think about how things are structured and how you're going because because attendance is still the name of the game. Your gates are still your main source of revenue. So that's why you don't put Tetsuya Naito on ice. That's why you don't say, stay at home, pal, in the meantime, on our way to Wrestle Kingdom. That's why you don't do that, because you need Tetsuya Naito because he's your last true draw. Now, will there be other draws to come? Well, you hope to hell there will be. You hope that there's going to be someone who's going to break away from the pack and you'll be able to observe and say, I see an uptick here. I see, better situations here. But for that, you need a pattern. You need to be able to observe things. And there's no better way to observe it than with your world champion. Usually your world champion is your top guy, is the guy that you feel confident enough that will draw money. So if Zack Sabre Jr. wins, well, there's going to be some very interesting metrics that we'll be able to check. I mean, Royal Quest in the UK, that's fine. I'm pretty sure, isn't it already sold out or close to? That's fine. He's going to be main eventing. He's going to be main eventing as IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. That's just fine. But he's going to have a Wrestle Kingdom, that's going to be a tremendous test to see how better his Wrestle Kingdom will perform as opposed to the couple of previous years. If he holds on to it afterwards, if he holds on to the title afterwards, well, we'll be able to see if the trends are up, if the year over year is better, if even the month over month is better, or the quarter or whatnot. We'll be able to observe. That's mostly how you see it. You have to try some stuff out sometimes. Of course, if the rest of the card sucks, I don't think, outside of having Jesus Christ himself be in the main event, I don't think it'll draw. But yeah, look, it's still a primary statistic that we attribute to world champions and what they're able to world champions, their drawing power, that is. If you have a large enough roster and a talented enough roster to just make it feel like a good package deal, good for you. But normally your world champion is the representative. It's the face. It's the guy that's supposed to put asses in the seats to begin with. But back to the match. Well, I think I kind of said everything that I had to. I'm looking over my notes here. I think I pretty much said everything that I feel I had to say here. You know, Naito does a hurricane, an avalanche hurricane rana. All these weather names for pro wrestling moves are just getting in the way here. And I like the finish. He tries to do the Destino proper, but he can't. Great Khan gets like a swinging STO or something. He lifts up Tetsuya Naito, who reverses him into a slop drop, and then lands the Destino for the win. I thought the finish was very good. You could see, Great Khan really helping out Naito, and that's fine. This is what it is now. I gave this match 3 3/4 stars. I thought it was very, very, very good, and a solid, entertaining, well-wrestled main event. That's all you really want. Well, after the match, might as well talk about it now. Zack Sabre Jr. comes out because he's staking his claim, right? Because he's going to be facing officially Tetsuya Naito. He's going to be facing Tetsuya Naito at King of Pro Wrestling, and this is also one of the reasons I think that this match lacked a little punch, lacked a little spice, because the conclusion was foregone, right? Like, there was no way Great Khan was defeating Tetsuya Naito for the title. Like it would have been like this most bizarre twist of fate for that to happen, right? So, everyone kind of expected King of Pro Wrestling, especially with how they announced the main event for Royal Quest before we knew who Zack was going to fight at King of Pro Wrestling. Like the fact that Zack Sabre Jr. decided that he wanted to not wait till Wrestle Kingdom and challenge for the title at King of Pro Wrestling, and then they set up Royal Quest with Zack Sabre Jr. in the main event against Sanada. Well, we were assuming it was the main event, but I mean, we were all like, oh, well, Zack is winning, right? Zack is going to win a King of Pro Wrestling, and then he's going to go defend his title in the UK. Like, he's going to have like the greatest welcome back, welcome home of all time. And then he'll still be able to do the Dome main event. Like that, once we saw all of those pieces in place, it didn't take much to sort of figure out what was going to happen. So you went, well, the Great Khan match is just like it's a placeholder defense. It's, Great Khan got a win over Naito during the G1. It wasn't the only one, but hey, we're not going to get into that. But so, Great Khan was like, well, I want a defense. Then I want to challenge, not a defense. I want to challenge for the IWGP World Heavyweight title. And, then they said, okay, well, we'll do it at the show here at the Destruction in Kobe. And no one really thought that Great Khan was going to be a winner here. Not with how everything was placed. Like, it would have been so out there. It would have been bold, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have hated it. I would make sure that I want to make sure that I'm that I'm not misunderstood. I wouldn't have been bothered with a Great Khan victory. Like, I would have kind of been into it. It would have been very bold. Anyway, Too late for that now, Warren. After the match, like we said, we have Zack Sabre Jr. He comes out in the ring, sort of to stake his claim. But then Shingo Takagi shows up. And he's like, well, don't forget me. And he's got his never open weight championship over his shoulder, which he just won earlier in the evening. Spoiler alert. We haven't gotten to that part of the review yet. So he's like, hey, Naito, Zach, I'm still around. And you want to talk about spoilers? the newly returned Ryohei Oiwa got into the ring and was like, hey, Takagi, that never title looks mighty fine. Do you think I could have a whirl at it? Do you think So that's tremendous. We'll talk about Oiwa's return to New Japan as a fully grown adult, I guess, in a second. But I got to tell you, this is very interesting. And right now, these are the two matches that are confirmed for King of Pro Wrestling on October 14, which is it's in 2 weeks, folks, right? It's like in a little more than 2 weeks. Whenever you're listening to this, I don't know. Maybe we are listening to this and the event is past. Maybe it's not in 2 weeks. But as we're recording this, it's in about 2 weeks. And there's two matches on the card. Naito versus Zack Sabre Jr. and Shingo versus Oiwa, which is fantastic so far. And I mean, look, again, we'll talk about Oiwa in a second. But that's what happened after the main event. Intriguing stuff. And we've set the pace. We're ready to go. And already, King of Pro Wrestling is super interesting. With just two matches, it's already super interesting. Yeah, 3 3/4 stars. I think I mentioned that, right? Yes, I did. Dave Finlay versus Yoshihashi. This had a very standard start. Well, Dave Finlay defeated Yoshihashi, right? He's still global champion, IWGP global champion. And it's a very standard New Japan beginning, right? And then they start referencing, well, when I say they start, in the video package that they did before the match, which, explains the entire story for everyone, right? So that everyone knows what the story is. So there's a video package before, just to make sure that you know everything, right? They make a particular point from poor Yoshihashi a few years ago, coming in to save, it was Okada, right? Coming in to save Okada from Jay White and Gedo when they decided to split from Chaos. Like, he just runs and he trips just as he gets to the ring, and he falls like fucking face first onto the steel of the ring on the floor. Commentary mentioned it, like, he was the meme of the internet for like 5 years, but with reason, because look, he really hurt himself, but it was still funny. But he really hurt himself, but it was still funny. It's the duality of man, folks, in this type of situation, where you're like, yeah, that was very painful, and it sucks that he got injured. That was terrible, but it was also hilarious. But the guy was in pain, and that's terrible, and he had to take time off of his career. Like, it's a stupid bad accident, but it's also funny. You just can't escape it. You can't. You just can't. Who is a saint enough to just go, no, that is not funny? No, it is funny. Like, it's on a cosmic level, at the very least, it's funny. Like, the irony of it, it's funny. Like, there's so many levels to that event. Anyway, we're not reviewing that, but then we're talking about that because it happened in Kobe, and people got really, not people, but commentary really put that over. They put it over in the video package, and then in the match, Finlay and Yoshihashi referenced that, with Dave Finlay wanting to ram him into there, but eventually Yoshihashi gets the upper hand and he rams Dave Finlay into the middle of the ring. So he got to eat dirt. He wasn't making fun of Yoshihashi anymore. Yoshihashi has raised above. He has risen above. Yeah, they fight up the ramp. They're teasing to they're teasing to do a suplex on it, and running shotgun drop kick. Then they get back in the ring, and Yoshihashi does a Tope con Hilo. David Finlay gets beat up for a while. He launches him into the post, which changes the complexity of the match, the complexion of the match, but also the complexity. You could do both. Throwing suplex by Finlay. They trade some strikes. Ripcord backbreaker and a dominator by Finlay, followed by the Irish Curse. And Yoshihashi locks in one of the moves I despise the most, like in all of pro wrestling, at least when Yoshihashi does it, the butterfly lock, which he has had in his arsenal for years. And I would actively make fun of it every time I'd see it, because it just looked like the softest hold. Like there was nothing that looked vicious about it. And seems to me, I haven't seen him lock in a proper butterfly lock like this, like he did at the Kobe show. Like that was really good. And Finlay had to struggle to get out of it. It was a really good spot that really did feel like the match could end right there, that Yoshihashi was really in control. Hell, they even had Gato throw in the shillelagh and Finlay couldn't pull it off. Even with that, like there was nothing. Yoshihashi even twists back the arm. Like you were buying it at this point. You're like, holy shit. You're like, this could actually end here. Because he's doing the butterfly lock. Finlay's trying to reach the ropes. So what does Yoshihashi do? He uses like one of his arms to grab that arm and pull it back and twist it. And Finlay goes, this sucks. And he quickly then used his legs to break the hold. And it was a fantastic segment. You could really buy into it. And the thing here, after that, Yoshihashi keeps the pressure on, does the Komagoroshi, and then pulls out the loose explosion that Walker Stewart and Chris Charlton lost their minds over. The karma was reversed into a stun dog millionaire by Dave Finlay, which I thought was really good. They're in and out of moves, into oblivion and a pop-up powerbomb by Dave Finlay. He lands the overkill, and we get ourselves the end of the match here. David Finlay retains. Interestingly enough, Hiroki Goto after the match, sort of angling towards Dave Finlay, and was eyeing that belt. So maybe this. First of all, this might be a third match right there for King of Pro Wrestling. That could be. We might even get some kind of nice little closure for Hiroki Goto in this year of Goto, the resurgence of Goto. Maybe this is how we top it off. Maybe not an IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, but the global title. That could be interesting. Could be a nice little. Could be a nice little way to recognize the resurgence of Goto's popularity this year. I love this match. I gave it 4 stars. I thought this was tremendous. I thought it was well done. This is one of my favorite Dave Finlay matches in a long while, and I'm gonna put a lot of that on. I'm gonna put a lot of that on Yoshihashi, because Yoshihashi always delivers in these situations. Like he's underappreciated and undervalued, probably because of the goofball affectations that we have for him, because of things like tripping and busting his face against the ring and stuff like that. But I'm I'm going to put a lot of it on Yoshihashi, but Dave Finlay, I felt, was in another mode. He like the Stun Dog Millionaire counter. I was not expecting that. Like I feel like that's not something you usually see out of Finlay, and it surprised me, and it made sense, and it was good. I'm still waiting for that big second gear Dave Finlay, like that moment where he just kind of goes Super Saiyan and explodes. Because like I talked about in the preview, and I think what they and I mean by they, Gedo, I think what he wants out of Dave Finlay is for Dave Finlay to be kind of like Jay White, a guy who is methodical and smart and, wrestles a non-work rate way that you usually expect in Japan, and be like just, a dastardly heel in the meantime. The difference is that Jay White is a charisma magnet. He is one of the best heels in the world. So whatever he couldn't do because of what he was trying to project as leader of Bullet Club, as a pro wrestler, whatever, he could make up for it with his just natural heel charisma, which Dave Finlay does not have. He's not even close to being on that level, but it's also unfair, I think, to go that far because, Jay White was just spectacular. Jay White is 1 in a million when it comes to heel performances. But nonetheless, I thought both guys put in tons of effort here. Love the match. 4 stars from me. You want to talk about matches I really love too? You want to continue down that road, that path? Shingo Takagi defeated Hinare to once again become Never Openweight champion. Of course, we spoiled this already because we did the main event stuff first. I mean, this match is exactly what you think it is, and it started exactly how you think it did, and it was just tremendous. It was tremendous, and I think it's one of their better outings. I feel like the final third of this match is particularly great. And, they told an incredible story once again, this time of Shingo just being worn the hell out. This is another one where a submission move came into, not unlike with the butterfly lock and Dave Finlay with Yoshihashi, Hinare's full Nelson, I forget what he calls it. It doesn't matter. The Ultimo. Hinare gets Shingo into one of his Ultimo and wears him down. And for a stretch then, Shingo is exhausted and, is leaning against Hinare. He can't throw any strikes with any gusto, any impact. It's looking grim for Shingo in this match, but of course, he fights back, gets a dragon suplex in. And Shingo, look, he's so exhausted. I forgot to mention this, but he's so exhausted, and I love this. It's like he gets picked up into the position for the Streets of Rage, but which is Hinare's finisher, and he can't, he tumbles out of it. He just shoves his way out. He doesn't do anything fancy. He's not trying. He doesn't do a reversal. He doesn't do. He doesn't get into chaining some stuff together to transition into another move. No. He just sort of tumbles out of it. I don't know if it was intentional or not. I don't know if that was part of the thing or if it was just a wee bit of a botch, but it worked in the context where Shingo is just too exhausted to be fancy. He's absolutely on I'm just surviving mode, and that was fantastic. And he fights back with a dragon suplex, and they have this incredible exchange of lariats and headbutts, and they tease doing the Sapporo finish, where Hinare grabbed both of Shingo's arms and then just cracked his skull, across Shingo's face and won the match. But Shingo gets out of that, and he lands a pair of huge pumping bombers, and then does the gnarliest Last of the Dragon, where he drops Hinare right on his head. And I'm like, oh my God, is he okay? But at this point, I'm like, when it comes to Henare and me being afraid and going, oh my God, is he okay? Like the default answer should be yes. Don't worry, it's Henare. He's always okay. Like his skull was busted open, and they dressed him up like he was in an old timey 1950s Looney Tunes. When they put the big headdress with the bow when cartoon characters would go to the dentist, right? Or they'd have a sore tooth. That's what he looked like. And they were like, all right, you're good to go. Go wrestle some more. And he's like, yeah, I'm good to go. So when it comes to Henare in his head, I don't know. He seems invulnerable. I think it's fine. This rule, like this is exactly the shit that I love in New Japan. This is the kind of stuff that I love in Japanese wrestling in general. Just two guys, hard hitting, just beating the shit out of each other for my enjoyment. For my enjoyment. They're doing it for me. And I think this is one of their better encounters. I still think the time limit draw was their best. But this, if you wanted to tell me this was your favorite, I'd be sure this is probably my second favorite. This is tremendous. 4.5 stars from your boy, MrWarrenHayes here. On this card, we also had Doki successfully retaining the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title against Yoshinobu Kanemaru in another great match. Like I'm just sitting there from this point on in the show. You're just like, you kick back, you make sure you have your favorite beverage, perhaps a snack. Try and keep it as healthy as possible. Watch your sodium intake, folks. And you sit back, you enjoy this, and this one kicked it off so wonderfully. Another just tremendous match. Yoshinobu Kanemaru goes after the knee, and boy does he ever go after the knee. It's just savage and brutal and meticulous and laser focused. Like no one does it. I dare anyone to show me who does working a limb better than Kanemaru does. Because he is so savage about it and you buy it. He's so precise and crisp and right on the nose every single time, every attack that he does on it. And then when he's locking the knees in and he's doing these awful holds, you're like, this fucking works. This is so good. So when Doki is, he's not able to pull off his moves, he's, when he goes for a Northern Lights suplex but can't do the bridge because his knee has been worked over, you're like, yeah, I buy it. Of course it did. Of course he can't do it. And Kanemaru is wrapping figure fours, I think twice overall in this match, if I'm not mistaken. And it just looks like the most excruciating moments in the history of everything. And Doki is so good at selling. He's so good at putting over that he's in trouble, and yet he's overcoming. Now, the unfortunate part, and Kanemaru even jams the knee off the apron right onto the floor too. He just like one of these where he picks up the knee, and he jumps off the apron and just nails it right into the floor. Like, it's good stuff. It just, everything looks vicious. And Show, of course, arrives because it's a House of Torture match, so there's got to be some of this goddamn nonsense. But you know what? Not so bad. Like this, they tried to get the whiskey mist to work, but they failed out. It didn't quite work out the way they wanted to. And that's fine. Like because that was pretty much the end of it for House of Torture interference. If you have a heel trying to cheat to win a match, overall, that's a basic precept of pro wrestling, and I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's when it becomes invasive, when it completely turns over the match, when the rest of the 10, 12 minutes that you've just watched becomes completely invalidated, because then the interference becomes such an integral part. The story shifts from the wrestling to that. That's where I have a problem. This was not the case. So I was pleasantly surprised. There's a ref bump here, where they try to do the nonsense, to try to do some nonsense, and nothing comes out of it. Like, it just doesn't work. So, okay. Doki lands the Daybreak DDT. He avoids another figure four. I think that's the third figure four that Kanemaru tries to lock in. Lands the Lariat and the Suplex de la Luna for the win. And I gave this 3 3/4 stars. I thought this was another fantastic match. We're cooking, as the kids say, rocking and rolling, as the older generation than I used to say. What did my generation used to say? It's good. I don't remember. I never used lingo. I was never that cool. What are we talking about? The tremendous match. I thought it was great. And after the match, show challenges for the belt. He sort of brings it up onto the ramp and teases to crush it with his wrench, and but he ends up attacking Doki, and it's all fine. It's all fine. So that could be a fourth match being set up for King of Pro Wrestling. So you'd have, if we think of it, right, you'd have Naito versus Saber, you have Oiwa versus Shingo, you have Dave Finlay versus Hiroki Goto, and Doki versus Sho. So, that's your business end of the card, really. You could do a lot worse. That's pretty good. Nothing on the tag team side. I'm not complaining. Don't mind me. I'm not complaining. Now we're getting into the rest of the show, which was look, the Hiroshi Tanahashi, we'll just skim over it, and there's a couple of points of interest, but I'm not going to go over these matches. Hiroshi Tanahashi, Toru Yano, and Bolton Oleg defeated Evil, Sho, and Yujiro Takahashi. The Hiroshi gets the win here after ELP made a save, a freshly groomed El Fantasmo. And the big news out of this one is that he pointed to the lion mark and said, that's home. He's not screwing around with Bullet Club or whatnot. He's going to be Hantai moving forward. Nice, clean look, doesn't look disheveled. And I think he's been working out too. He's looking good. He's looking good is what I'm trying to say. So we'll see how this affiliation with Hantai works. The trio of Zack Sabre Jr., Kosei Fujita, and X, who turned out to be Ryohei Oiwa, defeated the Just Five Guys tandem of Sanada, Taichi, and Taka Michinoku. So I said I'd talk about Oiwa a little later. This is where we are. This was probably the least surprising surprise in the history of surprises. I feel like everyone, even the most casual New Japan viewer, was like, yeah, it's going to be this guy, right? It has to be this guy. It's what made the most sense. He was all done with his excursion over in Noah. We all wrapped that up with a nice little bow. And he's coming back and he's hungry and he wants to get into the mix of things. And, well, there you go, and suddenly there's a new member of TMDK that's being announced. Well, it all seemed kind of coincidental. It all sort of, you're kind of like, are we sure that this is going to be, are we sure? Are we really sure? Yeah, we were sure. This was it. So, it was your run-of-the-mill trios match, New Japan style. It was fine. I don't think he necessarily shined here. I don't think he stunk either, but there was nothing where you're like, oh, this kid is back, you know? Or if you weren't familiar with him, you're like, oh, this is what everyone is talking about. Like it was a very basic return. Now, and at first I was, I had it in my notes, I was a little disappointed. I was like, really? This is all you're going to do? This is all you're going to do with Oiwa for his big return? One of the guys who is earmarked to be one of the tippy top guys in New Japan. Everyone likes this kid. I haven't met anyone who's like, Oiwa, so. No, everyone is super high on him. I've seen some of his matches in Noah. He wrestled one of my favorite matches this year with Kaito Kiyomiya, the headlock match. One of my favorite matches this year. We're all sitting around saying this kid is going to be a star, and then you do this. This is how you present him. But then they're setting him up for a big, he fresh off the plane, or off the train in this case, fresh off the train. He's in there with Shingo, gonna mix it up for the Never title. I'm like, okay. You could do a hell of a lot worse, and with a sicko like Shingo, I think that's going to be Oiwa's big return match, and I'm kind of glad they're keeping it in there. They're saving it. They're gonna make it happen, but they're probably, not probably, at King of Pro Wrestling. That's going to be an attraction. That's going to be a featured match. That's going to have a lot of buzz because a lot of people are going to be excited to see what he's going to do outside of the Noah context. But they're putting him into the ring with Shingo. Like Shingo, one of the best pro wrestlers in the world, a guy who's I don't think it's possible to have a rotten match with. You'd have to be an absolute sack of turnips for that to happen. Throw Oiwa in there. He's going to bring the best out of Oiwa, and maybe we'll see some back and forth there where that's also going to help consecrate this guy. Look, in my opinion, this is one of the guys who has all the potential to be one of New Japan's saviors, and I'm saying this, a little, a little cheekily, but also with a little sincerity. Like I'm somewhere between the two. I'm not saying it really seriously, but I'm also saying it seriously. I think Oiwa has nothing but upside. Nothing but upside. So you could do better. How could you do better? Well, you could pull a Kazuchika Okada return, right? You could do a Kazuchika Okada expedition return, right? You could do that, or you could do this. Well, and look, let's just see what happens. I'm curious. I do not think in any way, shape, or form that this is a failed situation, that it's a fumble. A lot of people seem to think it is. I don't know. I'm confident. I think this is a good way I think it's a good way to present him, bring him back, present him, get him back, get his feet wet in New Japan, right? As a guy. And a lot of people are like, well, is he a good fit in TMDK? Yeah, he is. And I think he's going to come across as the second of the company, especially after he wins a title, especially after he and Zach will probably both hold gold in that company, in that faction. Because we'll get to that in a couple of weeks, but you can absolutely make an argument for Oiwa winning the Never title off of Shingo. You absolutely can make an argument for that. And maybe this is why they want to take it off Henare. No disrespect to Henare, but they probably felt that Shingo could get a better match out of Oiwa than Henare could. And I kind of agree with that. Not again, no disrespect to Henare. He's just no Shingo Takagi. But then again, not a lot of people are Shingo Takagi. That's rarefied air, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, Henare is tremendous, don't get me wrong, but he's no Shingo. So I personally don't have a problem with it. He's gonna shine as the second of TMDK. Who are the others? Fujita, Robbie Eagles, like those are juniors. Haston Nichols, come on now. There's he's going to naturally rise above this crop of dudes that he's with. He's not going to be just, a background player. He's not going to be the Bushi of the group. You know what I mean? He's not going to be he's not going to be the if we're going back like to old versions of Chaos, he's not going to be the Yujiro Takahashi of the group. He's not going to be the Chase Owens of the group. He's going to rise above. He's going to be fine. I think a lot of people are showing a lot of concern, which is good because that shows that they're into the kid, but I don't see any signs of danger. Not at this point. Au contraire, I'm like, pretty interesting, pretty bold stuff. Let's see what happens. We had another singles match early on. Hiroki Goto defeated Gabe Kidd. I thought, not unlike the guys of the flagship talked about, I thought that they were going to give Gabe Kidd a win here because the last time that Gabe Kidd fought Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi was in a tag team match. It was the tag team match where Jake Lee got hurt and they went to a finish, and Goto was upset because Gabe Kidd didn't kick out. Like, it was clearly not the finish, right? They went to finish. It was clearly not the finish. Goto was surprised, and it sort of let you believe that maybe Goto wasn't supposed to go over here. And Gabe Kidd made a call. He called an audible, and he just let himself be beat because his partner had just been taken out. So I thought, since Gabe Kidd is a pushed commodity in New Japan, I thought that they were going to give him his win back here. That they were going to give him the win that he was supposed to get, but apparently not. But then again, it also explains what happened later on in the evening because, Goto came in to challenge for the global title. Well, if he had lost, then that wouldn't have made sense for him to then head on out because, there's no standings, there's no rankings in New Japan either. Right? But they usually do this pattern where a guy will win a match early on in the evening and then show up later for a challenge. They're not going to have a guy who has been on a losing streak come in and be like, hey, I'm going to challenge for this championship. That just doesn't work, But then again, they'll have a guy come off of excursion and challenge for, a major title in the company against one of the promotion's big stars. So what do I know, right? What the fuck do I know? Anyway, this was a good little match, 3.25 star. I think people were expecting more out of it, but I mean, look, this was like 1, 2, 3. This was the third match from the top, third match from the top because it's counted as 2 matches, right? Third match from the top. They're not going to tell Hiroki Goto and Gabe Kidd, third match from the top, go out there and have a 15-minute match. No, this was actually under 10 minutes. Well, the proper one, right? The no DQ. And that annoyed me. I'll tell you what annoyed me. Gabe Kidd, at first, coming out during Goto's entrance and then getting the cameras to follow him backstage to see that he had beat him up. I was like, yeah, this is very North American of you. This is kind of corny, but okay, I'll let it pass. But then both guys get counted out, and then Gabe Kidd grabs the microphone and says, we're going to restart the match and do it a DQ, and then they ring the bell and no DQ, and then they ring the bell and the match starts. And I'm sitting there going, when did Gabe Kidd get booking powers? What is this? And then I'm like, wait, this feels so much like North American booking right now, particularly WWE. I don't need this. I'm convinced this is all Gabe's creative, right? It has to be. Because you never see this shit from the Japanese wrestlers. They just come in and fight. It has to be these North American sensibilities. They're like, ooh. Gabe doesn't need this either. He doesn't need this fucking bullshit with, let's restart the match with, who cares? And it weighs everything down. I gave this match 3.25 star though. I thought it was fun. I thought it was really good. And then Yota Tsuji, Hiromu Takahashi, and Bushi defeated Jeff Cobb, Callan Newman, and Francesco Akira. The big story coming out of this, two of them, is that Yota Tsuji and Jeff Cobb are still at odds with each other. Later on, later on during the post-match press conferences, you know, that they do, the presser that they do, Tsuji and Cobb were like jaw-jacking at each other, and then Ren Narita ran in and took them out with his stupid push-up bar or whatever, pull-up bar, whatever it is. And so, you know, we're back to where we were with these three guys just before Narita got injured, because this is exactly the angle that finished the count-out draw that happened between Cobb and Tsuji for the World TV title. They went to the draw, and then after the match, they're jaw-jacking, and then Ren Narita runs in. So they did the exact same thing now that Narita's no longer hurt. So I'm fearing that they're going to do a three-way match for the World TV title, probably at King of Pro Wrestling again, and maybe as a way to protect Jeff Cobb and have Narita take the pin. But you could also make an argument that Ren Narita could take the pin, could win the match. And there's nothing that I would be less excited about than 15-minute sprints, 15-minute World TV title matches with Ren Narita as champion. You cannot get me less excited. Anyway, we'll see. So that was story number one coming out of that match. And story number two was Hiromu Takahashi going real hard on Francesco Akira's recently injured, or back from injuries. What am I trying to say? Francesco Akira's knee, which had taken him out of the Best of Super Juniors tournament. Now he's rehabbed, he's back, and Hiromu was going real hard on it. Kind of very edgy, you know, and they noted it at the end, you know, it's like, oh, what a cold, icy glare from Hiromu Takahashi looking over, because he won the match by just like beating the shit out of Akira's knee. Yeah, that's the big stuff. So we got a lot of stuff set up. Oh, then the first match was Dragon Dia, Ryusuke Taguchi, and Shota Umino, who is still in the doghouse, if you ask me. Defeated Tiger Mask, Tomoaki Hanma, and Yuji Nagata. Not much to report there. Yeah, so there's a lot of busy show, lots of surprises, lots of things happening, lots of matches being set up, right? So if we think over King of Pro Wrestling coming up on October 14 again, as we said, we know for sure Tetsuya Naito versus Zack Sabre Jr. for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. That's set in stone. Shingo Takagi versus Ryohei Oiwa for the Never Openweight Championship. That is also set in stone. Then we can make some assumptions. Then we can assume some things. David Finlay versus Hiroki Goto for the global title. Dookie defending the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title against Sho. And probably, maybe they'll do something like a special singles match with Hiromu versus Francesco Akira. Am I forgetting something? I don't think so. Anyway, if I am forgetting something, we'll find out in a few a few upcoming weeks, days, because it's not that far away. Like I said, like October 14, folks. You know, October is upon us. It's in 2 weeks. That's all there is to it. So, already shaping up to be a really good card. I'm excited about it. But as far as this one goes, Destruction in Kobe 2024, I recommend it. Look, I think the business end of this card is all really good. If there's really only one match you can watch, and that would be a shame, I'd say Shingo versus Hinare. But try to squeeze in the business end of this card. I think it was really good. If you can and watch the whole show, go right ahead. I don't think you'll be bored. I think you'll be entertained by by the matches. I think they all delivered in their own little ways. But this was a very good show, and full of surprises, full of stuff happening. That's what you want out of your pro wrestling. Don't make it boring. Don't make it boring. Make it interesting. Have some good matches. The formula is so simple when you think about it. There you go. Highly recommended from me, New Japan Pro Wrestling's Destruction in Kobe 2024. This will probably be the last thing we talk about tonight. Brandon posted this. New episodes of NXT will be available the following day on CW streaming platforms, the CW app, and CWTV.com, a CW rep tells me. That's good news, I think. That's very consumer facing. I think it's very interesting. However, episodes of NXT that aired before the CW run, which starts tonight, will not be available on those platforms. That's a little more concerning. Let's continue. The entire NXT weekly TV library is now missing from Peacock, probably due to NBC Universal's rights to that portion of WWE's library expiring. PLEs that originally aired on Peacock are still there. The NXT UK library is still there. Related, next day streaming rights for Raw and SmackDown, along with VOD access to Main Event, recently left Hulu in the US, unless you have Hulu Live TV. All Raw and SmackDown episodes are still available on Peacock, but new episodes appear only 30 days after their initial airing, which I still don't understand. That's goofball 1985 bullshit. The latest available Main Event episode on Peacock is dated September 11, indicating that the platform's window for Main Event is shorter than 30 days. It's unclear where viewers in the US will be able to stream next day episodes of Raw or SmackDown or get quicker access to Main Event, and it's unclear if Netflix will be the future holder of these related VOD rights when Raw starts airing live on Netflix in January. I sent questions to Netflix and WWE on this subject, but haven't heard back yet. I'll tell you what is concerning with all of this when I say I'm concerned. What's concerning is that all of the video, all the content, first of all, let's talk about just about NXT. We don't know what's going to happen with the library of content that is NXT. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what's happening with it. It may just become lost media, which is preposterous, right? But this is something, unfortunately, a guy like myself saw coming. Remember when they shut down the network and they set up the deal with Peacock? And a lot of people's concerns was, what are you going to do with what's going to happen to the archives on the network? The archives on the network are essential, are important. What are you going to do? And WWE said, well, upon launch, not everything is going to be available, but gradually we're going to add things back, And I myself was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Cautious about that, because I was wondering what the advantage would be for Peacock to upload the entire catalog of everything from the WWE network onto Peacock, because the catalog, the back catalog, the historical tapes were one of the key selling points of the network, of the WWE network. And that's a reason why a lot of us maintained a subscription. It wasn't to be able to catch a 205 Live necessarily. No, it was to have access to all of the hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of tapes that they collected after buying out all of the territories that WWE just had hanging around. They would digitize it all and it was all available. And it was a tremendous undertaking, and one that for archival purposes, people were very excited. But, as I often pointed out, WWE is not in the business of being an archive. They're not a museum. They are a for-profit corporation. So if the archive is not making money for them, if they're not able to monetize it, what are they going to do with it? They're going to shut it down. If it's not profitable for them, they're just going to take the stuff away. I saw it, I called that out all the way back then, and started talking about it a little stronger once the Peacock deal happened, and they said, well, we're gonna be continually adding to the Peacock catalog. And I'm like, that's a bad sign. That's a terrible sign. Unless they commit to put everything back, there's probably stuff that's just going to be lost. So now the question is, but again, it is not Peacock's responsibility to be the bearer of, Jim Crockett Promotions tapes. That's not what they're in. That's not what they want to do. They want to have people tuning in to watch their programs. And if the WWE network could not subsist as a standalone service with the archive, how would they be able to justify another streaming platform to pick it up and say, well, hey, you need to add in all of these tapes from the AWA because, it's wrestling history. They don't give a shit. Peacock doesn't give a shit. WWE doesn't give a shit either. The fear that I have now is that all of this media is going to become lost. It's just going to disappear forever, right? WWE, goes extremely hard on people who re-upload old matches, old tapes, to old TV shows of back in the day onto YouTube or other services, copyright striking them effortlessly, practically instantly, taking it down, just making stuff disappear so that they can be in control of everything, right? And that to me is this right now is my biggest concern, is that we are with WWE buying up all the territories and getting all the tapes and whatnot. We just might end up losing an entire library, a huge library of wrestling history, because they're sitting on it, and as long as they don't know how to monetize it, they're not gonna put their best foot forward on it, because it's not their responsibility. And I can understand that it's not, and appreciate that it's not their responsibility to do it. It just stinks because there's other avenues they could take. They could lease, just license this shit out to anyone else who'd want to create a service to just allow the history of pro wrestling to be easily accessible. That was one of the great things that the network did back in the day, is that you didn't have to get into the tape trader circles to be able to find some old matches from major North American promotions. You just didn't have to do that anymore. Now we're slowly heading back to that. And it's the same thing with New Japan Pro Wrestling, who has not re-uploaded a substantial part of their catalog after switching New Japan World to another service, a better service, a more operable service, but there's still a lot of content missing. There's still a lot of archives that aren't around anymore. And see, that's the great duality with these companies who then own these tapes, own the masters, start copyright striking people who want to just allow this to be out there in the open so that we don't lose touch or access to the history of pro wrestling. But they go ahead and strike these people down because they own the licenses, they own the rights to it. So it's like, no, it's mine and we don't share. And then they decide whatever's accessible or not. Then they're like, WWE is not interested in the history of pro wrestling. They're interested in the history of WWE. Vince said it himself in the doc. It's something that I've told you before. It's something that a lot of people like that are in my own circles have told you on their own podcasts as well. WWE is not interested in pro wrestling. It's interested in WWE. Vince said it himself in the documentary that he was stomping out the competition. He was He was taking out the territories. Was it good for pro wrestling? Probably not, but it was good for my business, and that's what I cared about. And that is still the attitude that pervades today. So we are in a weird situation here where, once again, WWE changes partners. They have this tremendous catalog of old old shows from NXT, from good to great to excellent, that were all available. And now it's like, whoop, nope. Right now on the CW, they're not there anymore. They're not there, and we can't guarantee that they're going to be there. We don't know what's happening. And I wouldn't be surprised if, the old black and gold era doesn't show up anymore. I wouldn't be surprised in the least. I think it's very curious that all of a sudden, when I start piecing things together, I think it's very curious that suddenly the WWE Vault channel on YouTube is suddenly becoming active and pushing out, shows that nerds like me will be like, oh shit, stuff from the Omni, that's tremendous. Why is that suddenly happening? Is this some kind of olive branch, some way to soften the blow, to be putting out all these, these dark matches, CM Punk's first WWE tryout and all that stuff that I'm very interested in seeing. Isn't it interesting that they're starting to do that on the WWE Vault when they're going to be moving around from service to service, and the future of their back catalog is not guaranteed? There's like 1,500 episodes of Raw or something like that, something to that effect, maybe more. There's there's easily over 1,000 episodes of Raw over the years. I'm saying 1,500. It's probably more. I don't know. I'm terrible at math. Where are they all going to end up? Are they all going to end up on Netflix or wherever? And if the deal with Netflix falls through, where do they go next? And maybe Netflix will accept to have a large swath of the catalog up, but what about the next service provider? Maybe they won't. And WWE doesn't care. Again, like their leader said in the documentary, we forget the past, we look to the future. But the past of pro wrestling is so rich and interesting and should not be forgotten. For years, it was simply an oral tradition where if you were in the know, you would understand what it is, where it came from, who were the players and the movers and shakers. That's why stuff like the newsletters became important. The stuff like the Observer and the Torch and so on and so forth, because finally we were getting written record of what was going on in professional wrestling. And then video, and then streaming, and we saw all these great possibilities, but it's all coming to a screeching halt at this point. And I'm sorry to say, but it's probably going to end up on us, the fans, those who want to preserve the history of pro wrestling, to make it available whichever way it means, even if we're, transgressing some laws, even if it means that we have to put our pirate hats on and hit the high seas. It's going to be up to us to preserve what we have as the history of professional wrestling moving forward. I've said it before, and it's unfortunately coming, and I hate that this is a I told you so type of situation, but I told you so. It's a situation where WWE is a company, doesn't see the value in monetizing it, so it's just taking it away. They don't see the benefit of putting it out there. If it was anyone else, I think that had access to all these tapes, there would be a way to have access that library. And it sucks that they are holding on to some of the most important video, some of the most important content in the history of pro wrestling, that they're hanging on to it, because there's no telling how this is going to play out now. There's no telling what's going to happen to it. It might just disappear off the face of the earth forever, and maybe tape trading is going to come back. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe just good old tape trading is going to be fashionable once again. Look, I mean, cassette tapes are coming back. Vinyl made a comeback. Cassette tapes are making a comeback. It makes you wonder, maybe the people who were afraid or concerned, more than afraid, of streaming in general as opposed to physical media, maybe they were right. Maybe they were indeed in the right. Anyway, that was an extended rant, but I feel very strongly about it. WWE is content right now to have people on Twitter arguing, saying, there's no way people went to Shea Stadium to see not Bob Backlund, but Bruno and Larry fight when Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant were on the card. And like, oh, brother, what a shame. But they're content to have people going out and saying that. WWE is, because they control the narrative. They love controlling the narrative, and now they can control the narrative on the complete history of pro wrestling, because they can put out whatever they want and they can hold back whatever they want. The history of pro wrestling cannot be put in the hands of a corporation. I have always said this. Always said this. For reasons exactly like this. So it bums me out. When I see this kind of stuff, it really, really bums me out. And I think ultimately as wrestling fans, we're losing here. We're on the losing end of this. And it's a shame. It really, really is a shame. And that about wraps it up this week for another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Thank you all very much for being here. One more pitch for a like or even a subscription here on the channel here on YouTube, or a review, a rating, that would help out tremendously. If you join me on, if you subscribe, I should say, on YouTube, you will also be alerted as to when I stream. So if you want to come and join the live streams, they're a lot of fun, very, very good times. We go off on tangents. We don't even always talk about pro wrestling. It's a good time. So subscribe to the channel. Make sure you do the bell gimmick so that you don't miss a single thing. We'd love to have you there. Otherwise, you can continue enjoying the Mr. Warren Hayes Show podcast and just get the highlights, right? See, maybe you're that type of person as well. You don't want to get into the mud. You want to be served the delicacies. Well, here you go. There, please continue doing that. That's also fine. I will be back Thursday. I will be back Thursday nonetheless with the AEW Dynamite review. Next week's podcast, well, we're going to be doing the WWE Bad Blood review. We've got some previews because there's two big shows happening. Isn't it next week? Yeah, it's going to be next week. Two big shows happening: Wrestle Dream and King of Pro Wrestling, AEW, New Japan. Got a lot to cover already next week. So whichever way you decide to hang out, please come back. I'd love to have you. Thank you very much. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me. I'll see you next time.